It's 6:16, and I would hereby call to order the June 2023 meeting of the Hamilton East Public Library Board of Trustees. We will begin by saying pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we will observe a moment of silence. Okay, next is the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda? Please note that public comment has been moved to the end of the agenda, so that we may move officially through the business of the board. Are there any corrections or changes? No? Okay. All right.
Do I have to make a motion? So do we have to approve it by vote?
That's
No.
so board meeting guidelines and policy revision. In order to provide clear guidance to members of the public in attendance at the HEPL board meetings, a policy has been drafted to ensure proper decorum as follows, so that the business of the board may be conducted efficiently and without disruption. I will accept a motion for the approval of the revised board meeting guideline policy, so we can move the discussion.
So moved. Second.
Okay, are there any questions or comments?
I would have two comments. First of all, I believe there's a phrase in there which says at the end of the meeting, which I understand we're attempting that move for the first time tonight. I would suggest that putting at the end of the meeting unnecessarily binds us in the future. We find that it's not fit. Consider that.
So we
It's
could
not being done.
What about like a time designated by the agenda?
So where exactly is that?
It's on page one
It's
in
on-
these, second red paragraph.
It's right.
Yeah, second.
So it could be at the discretion of the presiding officer.
Yes, I think that'd be, I'd
Yeah.
be comfortable with that.
Sure.
I just don't know that we need to. lock it.
I would suggest the most consistent way was with the open door law is what Craig suggested, saying that as scheduled in the agenda.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay.
And then the second issue that I would raise is at 2 points in it, it references or personal attacks or personally directed. I don't necessarily think that, to me, that ends up being not necessarily infringement upon First Amendment rights of those who might appear. And I'd be concerned that that's actually content based. Mark, if you disagree.
I disagree, and the reason I disagree is because it's preceded by the inappropriate language or disruptive statement. So you could say a personal attack would be, I disagree with you. But because it's already qualified as something that's disruptive, it would be, I disagree with you and I hate you, or something, you do have no qualifications to be in this, but something along those lines, that's more of an ad hominem attack.
Okay, but not merely saying a board member's name according to a vote. or
Because
certain segments.
it has to be disruptive. Again, that's going back to the OPO.
As long as it's read that way, I don't have a problem with it.
Right, question on, looks like there's a string of bullet points, starting about 2/3 of the way down page 2, the first bullet point. I guess what are we meaning by repetitive? Because I know I've been to a lot of meetings where a lot of the public come to be heard on a kind of a single issue. I know it's been the collection development policy, or I know one meeting, a bunch of people came out to get more particular kind of book or something like that. Is our intent to prevent that, or I guess what are we getting at by going for repetitive?
Well, again, we can have situations where we have a limited amount of time. I think at one spot we talk about 30 minutes of comment time. The idea here is you can have boards, you can have meetings And I've seen this happen, unfortunately, completely taken over by the same comment repeated by multiple people, and it's not fair to the people who don't get to speak, that if the same comment's being made.
I guess. Not sure I agree with that, because I know a lot of those meetings, I mean, most people come out and talk about one thing, so it's okay, we have what, 3 comments on one subject, and everyone else who drove out here, signed up to speak and came to be heard on that, didn't get heard, and then, I know as just a board member, I like to know. If a bunch of people have an opinion, I like to know it, opposed to just, okay, we heard it twice, no more, so I guess from a policy perspective. I don't love repetitive, but I'd be interested in other people's comments on that.
And you really put your finger on it, it's a policy question, that's what the board wants.
I don't have a problem with repetitive, because we're here to hear the conflicts and we'll listen.
Do we mean repetitive in terms of exact scripting? Is that what you're talking about, Mark, that you've seen?
Not necessarily, but and not necessarily even people's stating opposition, but what I've seen is somebody coming up and make the same factual point 4, 5, 6 times. For instance, in somebody's getting a zoning petition and somebody claims they're not even the owner. And you repeat it 5 and 6, okay, we've heard that point, let's move on to let the other folks speak. That's really what I think is conflict, that kind of point being repeated over and over again.
And so it's repetitive in the sense that a single person is repeating a point, not being efficient.
No, with additional folks.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'll agree with Craig and say, if people want to get up and say the same thing, that's a prerogative and they have the right to do that, so.
Right, because I don't think people are necessarily comparing notes, and it could be just happenstance that they quoted it at the fact.
And if the board chooses, you can still approve the policy with the proviso that language is taken out, and we'll circulate that copy to the group tomorrow. With the board meeting.
Sarah, can you just strike that word? Because frivolous and harassing, man, I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
What do we mean by frivolous? Because if we're talking about repetitive, I'd like to understand the source of frivolous.
Something that is almost slanderous, that has no basis in fact, or is impertinent to the discussion.
Yeah, I sort of agree, take the frivolous and.
Yeah, you should keep it harassing.
Who determines
Yeah,
that, right?
yeah.
So I would agree with striking both.
So we would leave harassing.
It's.
I think that one is defined a little bit.
Right, yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Sure. That sounds good. The other thing, that I talked to Ed about was with regard to the 3-minute, time limit. We've had 2 minutes in the past, we've had 3 minutes in the past. So what I would like to suggest is that, we can schedule up to 3 minutes so that we can, if we need to cut it back to 2 because we have 50 people signed up to speak, then we have the prerogative to do that. I suggest up to 3 minutes.
What would be the harm in going with 2? Because I think we've done 2 past several months. The reason we we're back to 3.
I think it just, if we leave it as a variable, that gives us some opportunity, depending on the size of the number of comments, to try and get in as many as possible. And I think that's a sort of a judgment call.
Yeah,
I think
and
it-
oh, sorry.
Good.
No, and just it would have to be uniformly applied. So if we're gonna say we have a lot of people at this meeting, we're gonna have a lower than 3, then everybody gets that same problem.
And I
Just to be
think,
fair.
the public plans ahead for their comments, so I think it would be, if anything else, a courtesy to patrons to know to plan for 2 or 3 minutes. So I think the consistency in that is important.
Well, but the problem then becomes they might have planned to have their talk and they get here as the number 11 person and they don't get to talk.
Right, so going to 2 would allow, if our time limit is 30 minutes, that allows 15 people to speak versus 10.
Can we just cap it at 30 minutes and let the 2 to 3 minutes be at the discretion of the number of people who've signed up to speak?
Well, I would go with consistency. That's my opinion, is to be consistent.
But, if we cap it at 30 minutes, or if we go 2 minutes and you only have 2 people to talk, and we generally will have.
I've been at HSE and they, I had a 3-minute speech planned and they changed it to 2 minutes because that's the number, they had a lot of people and they wanted to get them in, so.
I guess what's the harm in just being consistent and sticking with
What's consistent about 2 or 3?
Well, I think,
well, 2 or 3, not
think it-
leaving it open as 2 or 3 in the document, but just saying, we're gonna do 2 minutes, or we're gonna do 3 minutes.
Can we just cap it at 30 minutes for that?
I think
That
if
we're
you-
already.
3 minutes.
if you have the flexibility as the board to set the parameters, I think you can get more people in to speak. I'd rather see more people get up to speak. If what I don't want to see happen is someone comes to speak and then they get here and they've had to be capped because of. So if we have 50 people here, well, then we do 1 minute instead of 2, then we're gonna get more people in. So I think we have that freedom, but then if there's only, 5 people that will speak, and give them all 3 minutes.
Well, we can also look at having the 30 minutes, at the discretion of the presiding officer, we will extend it to 40 minutes because we have 50 people who want to speak. Then I think the presiding officer should have that discretion too.
I agree.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly can do that.
So the language should be 30 minutes or more based on the board's decision, the president's decision.
Presiding officer.
Presiding officer.
Time may be extended at the discretion of the board president or presiding officer. As
Okay.
to capture that. I don't know if that's useful.
And that way there's flexibility with it. The time for both the overall comment about portion and also the individual.
Okay, so what are we doing with the individual, the 3 minute, are we making that variable too, or?
I suggest up to 3 minutes.
That's the way I'd like to see it, that, and let the presiding.
Yeah, I agree.
Are there any other comments or suggestions?
Up to 3 minutes, so go ahead.
Where does one find the consequences for bad behavior?
So they're not written in stone in this document as policy as suggested by council.
Yeah, I mean, partially because you don't the consequences are first and foremost written in the statute. The open door law says people who are disruptive to be removed. We can't alter that standard. That's the standard we live by. It's a good standard. It's a reasonable one. And people who attend meetings, can attend meetings, participate as the rules allow. And if they're disruptive and they harm the process, they can be taken out of the meeting. And as far as significant disturbances like we experienced here, we can ask individuals to be given it's up to the police ultimately, but we can have trespass warnings given as well. So I mean, I think the consequences are there, they're statutory consequences, and
Okay.
we want to have flexibility to be able to use that as circumstances warrant, while at the same time encouraging participation.
I think that's fantastic. It just seems as though there were no consequences that were tied to this document or where to find them.
So part of the revision of this policy on board meeting information guidelines includes a bullet point that says request the assistance of the board president and request the assistance of law enforcement officers in the removal of a disorderly person when, after warning, that person's conduct continues to interfere with the orderly progress of the meeting. Again, just to remind everybody that this is a business meeting. It's held in public, so we do have quite a bit of business to attend to at every meeting. So we appreciate your cooperation. Are there any other questions? or
I'm not
comments?
trying to beat a dead horse on the up to 3
Yeah, I'm
minutes.
not sure.
But I just want to make sure if we're saying up to 3 minutes, that means every speaker gets an equitable amount of time.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
All right,
So
okay,
everybody would get
2 or 3, or, okay.
Well, up to 3 minutes doesn't necessarily.
It doesn't
mean
say
nor
that.
does the- Nor does that mean an actual solution. What you're saying is that if there's 60 people, they each get 30 seconds. Like that I don't think is the intent.
No, that's not, yeah,
No, it would be
just the pick.
And that's where having something that either
That
says
is
2 or 3
specific.
minutes in the discretion of the board might be more clear on that point,
Mhm.
or based upon volume of people to give ample opportunity. So I think regardless, we run into the 11th person or the 16th person issue
Right.
on some, every time. And the way you're gonna get to the actual literally by 5:30.
But we have the opportunity to extend time. We should be good. But you don't like that too. So would you prefer?
If we
two?
could just add, F2 is fine, if we could just add that, that speakers within the time
Person.
limit will get an equitable amount of time to speak. You see?
I was typing out with all speakers being given the same amount of time
Yeah.
to speak.
Right.
Okay,
Let's do that.
okay, that's fair.
That's a good point. We should have that on paper.
Okay. Okay, is there anything else? Well, okay. So, I'll say, all in favor with the edits, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, thank you. Okay. Next on the agenda is the Team HEPL Spotlight. I'll turn the floor over to Director of Human Resources, Nija, for our monthly Team HEPL Spotlight.
We're having some technical difficulties.
It's still streaming on the internet, but the connection between the computer and the monitor has dropped and we can't get it to reconnect, so we can't display the slides in the room.
Okay.
But they're the same slides we received.
Correct.
Okay.
Like, we can play, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. Tonight is a very special spotlight because it falls on the anniversary of our Ignite Studio, which turned 5 today. So we have a 2 child in the library. And one of our contributors to the Ignite Studio who are highlighting tonight, and her name is Patty Kirsten. Patty is our maker in residence in the Ignite Studio from May through August of this year. Patty wears many hats, and you'll be able to see why she is such a great fit for our library. She's a contemporary impressionistic painter, art teacher, author of several books, and former children's librarian. Yes, the librarian. Patty started as a page at her libraries in high school and college. She then was a circulation clerk, and then went on to become a children's librarian and earned her MLS from Indiana University. Patty also has a BFA from Appalachian State University. Now, Patty became an artist so that she could share her feelings through visual storytelling. She loves using color and symbols to connect with other people in a meaningful way. She started painting earnestly when she majored in art in college. Since then, she has learned from a variety of teachers and has become an art teacher herself. Patty has an art studio, the Studio Alchemy Art Gallery, which is open every first Friday of the month in downtown in Indianapolis. So that's a plug for you, Abby. At her residency in Ignite, Patty explores techniques to use artwork to express emotions and stories. She teaches a variety of skills, including realistic drawing, color mixing, and the experimental spontaneous techniques of surrealistic artists. It's hard to say all that. It is Abby's goal to share artistic skills in a way that encourages her students to find their own voice and style. So our Director of Experiential Learning, Caitlin Coyne, had this to say about Abby. Ignite was extremely excited to invite Abby to join us as the maker in residence this summer. Prior to starting her residency with us, Patty taught plein air painting in 2019 and again in 2021. That's a fancy French word. As the instructor for those classes, she was incredibly patient and thoughtful with our patrons as she guided them through the process of creating paintings in the great outdoors. This summer, she is leading a range of classes for youth and adult patrons, including abstract painting, puppetry, and kamishibai storytelling. Patty does a fabulous job creating a sense of community in her classes. And in the first month of her residency, we've heard patrons raving about how wonderful she is as a teacher when they exit her studio proudly admiring their completed projects. Patty will be in Ignite through mid-August, and we invite everyone to come meet her. So finally, a few words to share with us. It is exciting to be part of the Ignite Studio because it is such a new and innovative space. I believe that one of the most important roles of libraries at this time is to be a center for the community where a wide variety of people can come together to learn and grow. So at this time, I'd like to ask Abby, she's already standing obviously, to be recognized. Thank you, Abby.
That is Hattie.
Patty, were you at one of the displays of painting? Yes, that was so pretty. What event was that?
It's the farmer's market.
Yeah, she was there and she was just standing there painting. It was beautiful. It was flowers. It was really pretty. You're very talented. Thank you. Thank
Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Addie. We appreciate all you do for the library. Okay. So next we're moving on to the consent agenda. Are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda?
Yes, I'd like to move to remove the meetings of the regular meeting from the consent agenda. I have a couple of corrections.
From the
May 25th.
Okay. Okay. We'll remove the minutes of May 25th, 2023 meeting. Will those be removed from the consent agenda and discussed next? But meanwhile, I'll accept a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
Make a motion.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next, I'll accept a motion for approval of May 25th, 2023 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion?
Yes, I think it says here Ray Madelone mentioned, Ray Madelone motion, to approve the creation of a caregiver resource collection in both letters. I don't recall using that word because that was a word that came from the audience that was a suggestion. I had been talking about a parent teacher. So I'd like the record to be corrected to say a creation of a parent teacher resource collection.
We discussed the caregiver terminology a bit during that meeting, from what I recall. Based on some excellent points that patron made, that not every adult that comes into the library is a child's parent.
Yes, we discussed it, but I don't think we decided that was the name. So that makes it sound like a motion to approve the creation of a caregiver resource collection. That's not a name that we agreed upon. So I just want that. The general discussion was on a parent teacher resource center.
Actually, Ray, I think your point's well made, and I think if anything, it should be all lowercase, just like.
Yeah, don't make it.
Because it's amorphous, you're
Good point.
moving for that concept to move forward, not necessarily like,
The
right,
name,
you,
Correct.
I understand it's gained life and it's been developed as a plan. But
I like that.
I get your point.
Okay.
And so when we talk about that collection, we can talk more about the name, but at that time, you weren't approving that name.
That's the point.
Oh,
It's not the words in this motion. It's-
yes, gotcha.
That makes sense.
And the word parent is consistent with the use of the word parent through our policies too.
So to clarify, the change should be to change it to, Ray motions to approve the creation of a parent teacher collection in both libraries and have that be lowercase p
Yeah,
/
resource,
teacher.
leave resource in there.
Okay,
Yeah, it's right there in the second sentence. The board engaged in discussion on the topic of the creation of a parent / teacher section.
Yeah, because that's, I've raised it. I originally started off with the, what I saw at Carmel, and that was a parent teacher resource. Okay,
Okay, so that change will be made in
Yep.
the minutes.
No problem.
Okay. So, is there a motion to approve?
so moved.
We have a motion already on the
Oh, yeah.
table.
The vote-
We
yeah,
need to
vote.
vote.
We just got to vote.
Okay.
Vote.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
All abstains, and I wasn't there.
Oh. Okay. Motion carried. Okay. All right, next is claims and warrants. I'll accept the motion for the approval of the claims and warrants so we can move to discussion.
So, second.
Appreciate you.
Okay, so do we have any questions or comments about the claims report?
Yes, I had one. The JRD Web Solutions for Indiana Room Database, is that something that's a routine update of the current existing Indiana Room, or is that part of the contract?
that is, the work to move our cemetery database onto a more sustainable platform. So it's not related to CRDC work.
Good. And And then I just wondered, it said Ignite workstation furniture, $9,438 is, what is those?
It's staff furniture. We had to create a new office because we have more staff. So we have, and that's correct, isn't it, Caitlin? Yeah. So we had to, purchase workstation furniture to create out of some of our storage space, a place for staff to have an office.
I have a question on page 11. There's an item for the Diligent Corporation for $6,000. Is that the initial payment?
The diligent, that's the word, that's for a year.
That's the whole.
That's the whole year. Yeah.
And have they given us a completion date?
We are in the process of setup right now. So we're in that, I think it's an 8 to 10 window. So we should have it. We may have it ready for the August meeting, but I don't want to promise that. But yeah, we're in the process of training and building the site right now.
Okay. And then, let's see. On page 12, open pivot. For $1,800.
Yeah, Open Pivot is, we work with them on a fairly regular basis for leadership coaching and development. Right now, we're working with Open Pivot with our leadership team to develop the, as you know, our deputy director, Katie Horton, left. And we're working with Chris from Open Pivot to rethink our leadership structure in a way that is going to make the most sense going forward.
Thank you.
I have a quick question about the patron requests. Do you, just because there are so many individual ones, do you buy from different sources? Is that?
We do. We try to streamline that as much as possible and buy from the sources that we get the biggest discount from. But sometimes patron requests are sole source, so they're only available through the publisher, or they're only available mostly through the publisher. We don't typically buy third party, which means someone on Amazon selling, their collection. We want new books for the library, but yeah, different sources. There's also different purchase orders because we order them as they come in. So we want to prioritize patron requests and get them in as quickly as possible, so they're processed pretty quickly. So we do them as they come.
Okay, any other questions? Comments? Okay. All in favor of approving the claims, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, next we'll have the merit pay presentation by Megan Neal with NFP.
Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I can. Yep, I just wanted to make sure. And I believe you have a copy of the slides. I can also share them, but it sounded like there was maybe a technical issue. So I can just work off of the notes if you can refer to those. So it's nice to meet some of you. It's nice to see some familiar faces. I'm the NFP compensation consultant, one of our team that has the pleasure of working with the library. And today I was asked to come and share a little bit more information about what a merit matrix is. Okay. Thank you. Oh, it looks like I don't have the ability to screen share. So if there's someone that can give me that ability in the Zoom platform, that would be great. And I'll just keep talking. Oh, perfect. Okay. If you can see the slides now. Yes, okay. Thank you. Thank you for confirming. So first, let's start with what a merit matrix is and why it's a really common option that we use within the compensation world. So when we're thinking about pay for performance and rewarding employees for their pay or for their performance, this is a common way to do this or approach this because it allows an organization to remain consistent within whatever the overall budget is for increases in a year. But it also allows the organization to vary the amount of increases that individual employees receive based on two main factors. First, their individual job performance as what has been created on their annual performance evaluation, and then also their place within the salary range. And when we think about this in concept, before we look at an example and some numbers that are just a generic example, what we want to do with the budget generally is really to try to prioritize those high performers who are lower in the overall salary range for whatever their position is. So those who are lower in the range are further away from what the market rate is from the job for the job, and would be potentially at more risk to leave the organization or turnover based on pay because they're lower in that range. Now, we know there's lots of reasons why people may choose to leave, and pay isn't the only one, but that's one factor that we think about. So by using this merit matrix approach, what it does is allow the highest performers who are the lowest paid in their grade to receive the highest increase. So let me show you kind of a simplified example. This is a generic example. It is not specific in any way to the library. So I want to make that really, really clear. It's completely generic. So when we look at how we do this, first we need to know what the overall budget is for spending, how much we really have in terms of a percent. So in this example, it's 4% that we were working off of. And as I mentioned, there's two different factors that go into this. There's the performance evaluation rating, which helps us to understand performance on the left side in this example, and then how they are placed in the salary range. So how their pay compares to what the range is for the job going across the top in this example. And if we kind of zone in on just the highlighted areas that I highlighted here, we can see that the highest performers who are lowest in their range are receiving the highest increase in this case, or a high increase of 5.5%, compared to lower performers that are already pretty well paid and higher in their range, receiving that lower amount of 1.5% in this example. Generally, I'm taking out of the equation those who aren't meeting performance expectations at all, because they shouldn't be receiving a performance increase if they're not meeting what those expectations are of the job. So that's why those are 0. So how we work with clients on this is really depending on whatever the factors are for the library in that given year and what the budget is, we would develop this specifically for the library going forward. So let me pause there and take questions and feedback. And what can I clarify?
Hi, this is Ray Madelum. I worked in aerospace. Whoops. I worked in aerospace for 35 years. We had merit pay. And the way we worked pay was simply you were in a group, you're in a department, say, and then you have various engineering levels, 100E, 100D, 100C. And within those categories, you would take the pool, you would take the salaries times the percent for the pay raise, and you apportion it from top to bottom. Now, what this sounds like is more an equity type of program, because you're convolving two things. Some people are either in the wrong pay grade, they either entered it that way, or they haven't performed very well and they stayed low. And then you're trying to use pure merit pay to solve that problem and to award people. People who do good work in the category that they're judged against their peers should get the most money, whether they're highest paid or lowest paid. Merit pay is not, I don't believe, should be used to affect changes because we had the person in the wrong grade category. So I think you need to separate those two things. I'm looking for a pure merit pay, not a adjustment. We had been working on adjusting the pay scale to get people up to the right levels. I think that's a separate issue than merit pay.
Is it okay if I give some thoughts on that?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Great, great. So there are different ways that you can approach this. A couple of pieces. So to the first point, this does not address if somebody is not in the right pay grade. So if their job is not in the correct grade or the grade is not adequate for the job, this does not address that in any way. The reason why I would say that this is a preferred approach, and there's not always a right or wrong. Compensation is an art and a science. But when we look at how individual employees progress through a range, they should be moving from the minimum of that range up towards the middle of that range more quickly than they should be from the middle of the range towards the top when they're getting higher paid within that range. So this is a very common approach to bring these two factors together, because if you look at, it's still rewarding your highest performers with receiving a greater increase, but it is giving those who are lower in the range more of an increase. So it's that matrix approach between the two.
But that's not merit pay. Okay, you're giving the lower person in the range more money. For what reason? Only to raise it because he's low in the range, not because of performance. I mean, if you use merit, it should be based on merit only. If we have the other problem that we have people who have somehow gotten stuck in their pool at the wrong level, that's something we should correct by just raising their salary, not by using the merit pay, penalizing the top performers who might be the highest paid over the lower performing, and giving them more money.
So I have a quick question. So as of right now, for somebody to move in their pay range, they only move on that annual, like 3%. Correct. So right now, people only move on COLA, or what do you call it?
It's just an across the board increase.
Okay, so I think to Ray's point, the library's operated without any type of merit-based raise system, other than everybody gets 2 to 3%. A year.
That is accurate. We have not had a merit-based system. No.
Okay, so everybody gets the same amount. How much was it this year for 2023?
4%.
4%. So without us bringing something merit-based online, everybody gets 4% every year.
Everybody gets whatever the increase is, and it's
Okay.
not always 4%.
So there's no mechanism for people to move in their pay band currently.
Correct. So that's what the merit matrix addresses is, I think there may be a disconnect because we're not talking about people who are at the lower. Everyone who's in this pay band is appropriately classified for the work that they're doing. When someone comes in new to the role, they come in at a lower amount, but they become good at the job and are performing at a higher level. But without some kind of merit matrix like this, they're only moving up a very small amount. And people who are performing at the same level within the same pay range, who are already higher, like they've been here longer. So what we end up with now is that the longer you're here, the more your raise is. But even if we did merit at 1%, that would still be the case. And this kind of.
But I think it also
corrects
speaks
that.
to how people negotiate their pay when they start. And I think we saw it last year when you hired, I think like 2 people at the same time, they're in the same pay band, they had negotiated differently. But people come into pay bands based on their prior work, their credentials and their expertise. So where you decide to hire somebody within a pay band is not necessarily part of merit. And I agree, when I look at this and I see 5.5 for your highest performers, and the range is 5.5 to 4.5%. I just think your highest performers should be like, if you're in this range, you get the top amount.
Well, and that's what that is. This would replace the across the board amount. People would not get 4% plus this. They would get this. This would take the dollar amount of 4% or 2% or whatever and apportion it based on performance.
So you're taking away the annual increase.
Yes, this would replace that.
But you're still not doing that. You're still saying just because someone is at a lower salary, they deserve to get more merit pay.
No, that
If
these
you-
are high. Go ahead.
If I could just jump in on that, I'm sorry. If you look at this example, even the person who's highest in the range, if they have a higher rating, the percent is higher than the person in the next level of rating. So if we look at the highest performer, highest in range over to the very far right, it's still 4.5. That's still higher than that next level of performer that's below it. It's still, the higher the rating is, they're still making more than what that level is below. It's just what that range is within.
And this motivates performance because you have high performers who have the ability to earn beyond the COLA.
Have we seen the criteria?
I don't know.
We have an existing performance review system, and I did include in the document I sent in April, I included how we would weight the different areas of the performance evaluation based on the role in the organization. So if someone is at a leadership role, they would have a greater weight on their progress toward higher level goals than someone who is, say, a shelver, who would have a higher weight on their accuracy of work and their core work. They wouldn't necessarily have a greater weight on attaining library goals because their work is much simpler. But I did include that in the April document.
Yeah, I remember we talked about that. It's, it was the way you're rating leadership versus,
Yeah, different bands, yeah. And this would allow us to your point, Tiffany, when we hire someone who's a great performer who doesn't have any experience, this allows that person to move toward that mid-range, which is the market amount, in a way that is faster than that across the board amount, where someone who is a good solid performer who's already higher in the range would still get a raise higher than someone who is meeting expectations, but would not progress as quickly to that higher end. So it makes it brings everybody toward that market rate for the job.
Which is retention.
Which helps
But
with
I think
retention.
that when you say brings people toward market rate, that's not the goal of merit pay. Merit pay is to reward top performers.
And this is both.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I think that some of the, we were looking for a merit-based system that was pure merit and not with the goal of getting people to a target range, but purely based on where we were with pay, yet in 2023, people only get the cost of living adjustment. And we wanted to make sure that there was a mechanism to reward people. And, you know, putting the two together kind of makes it a little bit cloudy. Because when you talk about getting people toward the middle, that's not the goal of the merit-based pay system, it's to reward people. So I think that's why there's just a little bit of disconnect between what we were expecting and what we're seeing.
I feel like this is both and. So if we were still able to do the across the board and then add merit on top of it, that would be one thing. But our amount that we have available to offer is limited. And what this does is combine those two goals in a way that allows us to utilize the funds that we do have in a very predictable way in order to do that performance-based pay in a way that is more and more common among
So
different
with
industries.
the justifications that in an absolute basis, the top highest in range will be getting more money because they're higher.
Yes,
However, when you're talking on the water cooler and somebody says, I got a 5.5% and the top performer, I got a 4 point, knows that they had a 4.5%. How's that gonna fly?
if you boil it down to dollars, it's still more.
It still seems to be.
It's never gonna make everybody
We're
happy.
never gonna avoid those water cooler
Yeah,
conversations.
But you know, if we were able to work out. We were able to work out some a flat increment. And merit pays, that's where I think we were originally thinking about.
I guess I'm not understanding how this isn't rewarding people, because if you had a COLA before where everybody got the same. And in a matrix like this, you high performers who are able to earn beyond the COLA, how is that not a reward?
I know it's a reward, but I'm saying is that there's then on a percentage basis, we can just look at percent. You're telling this person he's getting a 5.5 and you're having to do the
That's
adjustment.
lucky.
But if you rank, okay, so we have people in range. And you rank them from top to bottom. I mean, that's how.
That's not how it works though. You know, when we do performance reviews, we could have people that get the same rating, depending on their individual performance.
Yes,
So what is the point of ranking? Like you have two people who say our range is, I'm getting this up. Say our performance range is, you know, we can get between both two people got 3.5, got a 3.5 on the their performance scores. And if we rank them then 1 through 10, one of them is going to get a smaller raise for what reason?
because they rank lower than the guy in the top.
But how do you determine that if everybody has the same job and everyone's scored the same by their manager? Are you saying our managers need to go in and say, you're my favorite, so you're gonna get more than you, even though you got the same
Yeah, I
score?
did that for a living.
Yeah, but that's not the way it works. Megan, do you have a comment on this?
I have a question for Megan. If you have if she can comment, and I can ask my question.
Well, forced ranking isn't a very common system anymore because just as Edra was kind of saying, it's more when it's based off of a rating and trying to share, kind of looking at each individual employee, which performance rating based on how they're performing is most appropriate to describe their performance, if that makes sense.
My question, Megan, is I know NFP is a nationally known and recognized benefits broker. And so how common is something like this among today's organizations and companies?
Extremely common. I would say just anecdotally, out of probably the 200 clients that I work with regularly on pay for performance, 75% of them use a matrix similar to this for kind of the reasons that we shared, including some governments as well as non-for-profits and for-profit as well. So it's kind of common across industries and sectors, because I think as organizations budget, similar to, I think, the situation we have here, it's a great way to manage to an overall number and really look at how to progress individuals through the range and also reward those higher performers using one budget and taking an approach like this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or concerns?
Are we voting on this today, or what are we doing with this today? It was.
I was asked to provide a proposal for merit pay, and this is the one I would suggest for the reasons that are indicated. I don't know if a vote is required. We still have to do the budget discussion. But this one would allow us to, again, work toward that dollar amount, that's a % of our budget. But it's really, you guys get to decide.
I would be willing to make a motion to vote on this proposal today.
I'm sort of
I
looking at,
would like to see just like one set number, like your highest performers get 5%, maybe it's 3.5, and then maybe it's, you know, whatever. Can you go back to that slide, please? Because I do think that if people come in at different pay, you know, if we're all making $100,000 and I get 5%, and you're making 90 and you get 5%, we're all still moving in our pay band at the same way. And I just think that I would like to see set numbers there.
So
I don't like the ranges for the highest performers. This is just me, it's personal. I think that, you know, if you're like, oh, high performers here get 5% raises, you know, like, oh, okay, that's the goal. You know, that I want to be a 5%er, that's my goal. How do I get there? And I just think it keeps things really easy and equitable. If everybody knows that there's 5% on the table, and I would like to see the numbers back down, 5% being the highest, and then however you want to go through. Does not meet standards. That's a tough place to be to not get an annual raise. But I would just like to see set numbers.
So is the request then that we go to just a traditional? So okay, here's my question. Are you wanting to see, if we do that, we don't have any way to predict how much it'll be. So with this, we work toward the budget and factor everybody's scores in, and then these numbers are, we have, say we set 5% for the amount of increases for the library. So we take 5% of our total salary budget, right? And that's the number. And then that fed into this matrix allows some people to get more than 5%, some people to get less than 5%. If we do just a standard tick, 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 we won't know until the performance reviews are completed how much that's going to be, unless we just budget the whole amount.
What you do is you set whatever the overall percent increase. So let's say 5% is the overall percent increase. And then you take a look at the groupings of.
Right, not to interrupt, but I do not recommend that we do forced ranking. It's not something that is common in any industry anymore, and I'm afraid that that would not be, that with our performance review system, I don't know how we would differentiate between a high performer who gets a 3.7, I'm making this up, and another high performer who gets a 3.7. How do we decide which one of them gets the 5 and which one of them gets 4.7? And I don't know how that would work with a straight percentage either, if we're working backwards from that number.
I think.
So I feel like these are all different
I
kinds of
think if we
things.
see everything together, like how you're gonna rate people,
Yeah,
how we're going to evaluate them in terms of, the merit they're gonna receive, and then also the amount of money. I think if you play and model that, that will be helpful, and you might be able to tweak your system for, reviewing people so that you're able to tease some things out. So I think you can't just, I don't think you can just really make a good decision if we only have this part of it.
the point of the matrix though is that we start with the performance, and so the things that we know going into this matrix are the dollar amount that we have for raises
Well, I think
and the
before that,
performance scores of our staff.
I think before that, we have to know how you're measuring people.
And we have that, people are measured on the 4-point scale that are weighted by different categories.
And so
We have that in
what's
place.
the max that you can get on the scale?
4.
The max is 4.
4.
And then are there ever instances where, you know, it's 4, then I'm 3.9, 3.8, stuff like that?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so I think as a whole, you have to look at the whole merit-based pay, the amount that you're gonna give, the ranges, and the scoring together.
And that's what this does. That's exactly
No,
what
I
this
think-
system
I
does.
think we as a board need to see all of it together so that it works for you.
So I guess I'm not understanding. What do you mean you need to see it all together?
So I think to Ray's point, you guys are talking about rating people and not having to do forced ratings. I think if you look at how you're gonna rate people.
Which we have a system in place where we do that already.
Okay, so you're already working toward that, and
Yes.
implementing that.
Mhm.
Then we figure out like how much you're gonna cap this at, if it's 4% of the salaries.
Right.
And then you just tweak it so that we can work with it.
That's what this is. That's what this does.
So you're talking about not having the money to do it.
We're talking about, we would set these percentages based on the money we have. So
Okay,
these percentages might actually be 3.7, 2.6, et cetera. It would be based on the dollar amount we have
Mhm.
that we would factor into this matrix that we build.
Mhm.
And then we would, because there are a couple things that have to happen, and it was in my proposal in April. We're gonna move to, as we've discussed, like one annual performance review window, so that we'll have everybody's rating at the same time, and that would go into the matrix.
Mhm.
And then we will know in the next couple of months what our budget will be for increases based on the budget process that's happening right now.
correct.
So we will know that everyone's scores, and we'll know the amount of money we have, and we'll put it through this matrix, and it will determine what everybody's increase is.
So maybe we should look at this after you've been able to model it
Well,
with the budget.
I don't know how that would help. We've done some initial work with, we haven't done scoring on performance reviews for a long time. We've, like with numbers, we've done, more of a, performance-based, goals-based system that didn't have numbers applied to it, but we have gone back and applied numbers to those because it works. I mean, we can do that. And I guess I'm not sure what you're asking. Are you just wanting to know what those percents would be? Like if we start today and we use past performance as an indicator, what might those numbers be? Is that what you're asking for?
So it sounded like you were concerned that if we had like 5, 3, 2, that it would affect the budget differently.
Yeah, it would, because we wouldn't know until the end of the year how many dollars we needed. Like, what if everybody was a high performer? Wouldn't that be great? If everybody was a high performer and the cost was, and we do 5%, for example, then everybody gets 5%, or they get 4% or 3%. There's no way to predict
So
what
there's
that dollar
there's-
amount is.
Usually people will use like a bell curve to predict.
I mean, we could do that, but what this does is allow us to work backwards from the numbers.
But then I'm thinking you do your rating and then however people rate it, and if everybody's a 5, then they just get,
Unlikely.
but no, but if everybody is rated a 5 and there's only $10,000 on the table, then everybody gets an equitable amount.
Everybody gets a lower amount.
Yeah,
But-
so I think that you just have to figure out what your amount is and then work back from
Well,
there.
and again, I feel like this method is a great way to do that, that gets us to pay for a high performer that moves them through the ranges. Because as you noted, and you're correct, this across the board increase doesn't do anything good, right? It's just longevity, the longer you're here, the more you're paid. And we do factor into our performance discussion system, like we expect people to perform at a really high level, period. But that's neither here nor there. But you're right, it doesn't move anybody through the ranges. So we have a lot of people who are really high performers, who came in with no experience, who are still sitting in the bottom of that range. And what this system would do is allow those people who are continuing to perform higher to move up a little quicker, maybe than someone who's already sitting at the top of the range, who's moving more quickly because they make more money to start. So I think we might be kind of talking about similar things in a different way.
Yes, whatever your amount is, you have to fit your amount to fit the people.
Right.
So I think that whatever you're gonna budget for, I don't think it's going to matter how you get there. You just have your amount, you have to work back from that.
Right, and this is a tool we can use that will let us
Correct.
accurately do that in a way that just having, we do 4% or 3% wouldn't. So this will allow us to most efficiently utilize all the increased dollars we have in a way that's gonna reward our employees.
Correct, and so whatever, and I want to make sure that we're saying the same thing. If you use 5% as your amount for the total merit pay matrix, I think that your highest performers, your middle performers, it should be a set amount for each group. That is what I'm saying.
And the challenge with that is that you can't work to a number with that. You know what I mean? So maybe what you're saying is instead of changing, I feel like maybe we can talk about this in the budget committee,
Sure.
but I guess what I would like from the board is, can we proceed with looking at our compensation, working toward a number that we budget, and figuring out how to apply those dollars to the highest performers in a way that's going to pay for performance. And I think that we want the same thing, and I see this as getting us there, and I think you see it as inherently maybe unfair because
I mean,
there's.
pay for performance, and you're paying for performance. And in my mind, your top performers, they get what they get.
Yeah.
Your middle performance, they get what they get. And I think once you start playing in those bands,
Well,
it becomes unfair.
I see what you're saying, but I think it's the opposite because in our business,
But
like a
if
nonprofit, if you just happen to come in at a lower amount and you're performing higher, you are stuck. You are stuck at that lower end of
But we
the salary.
talked all this last year when people were hired,
Yeah.
they got to negotiate better. And I know sometimes people take jobs because they may come in at a certain level, but they're eyeing a job at a different level.
Yeah,
And if people are concerned about being in a lower pay band for quite some time, then it is time for them to challenge themselves and get a different role within the organization.
yeah, but that's not doing what we want to do. I don't.
But that is rewarding your employees and making sure that they're working according to their skills in their day-to-day jobs a merit-based.
We do that
pay.
already.
That is not your merit-based pay system.
Yes, please, Kurt.
Your merit-based pay system is rewarding your top performer. And I think that when we talk about where people are in their pay scale and we talk about rewarding them, it makes it a very muddy thing.
That's why it's calculated.
Okay, I think the problem this seeks to solve is, let's say you have somebody who's a high performer that comes in low. And they say, okay, I can be stuck going through the ranks slowly, or I can just apply somewhere else and get
Yes.
another job.
And that's what
like you.
happens every day.
This allows someone to stay here who's doing well and doesn't incentivize them to go elsewhere to make a pay jump, is how I view it.
I work for a company, I supervise a staff, I do this every year. I have people who come in inexperienced, low in the range, who learn quickly, excel quickly. But they're still paid low in their range, so they're out looking for other jobs. I lost somebody last year because of that.
But
I have a
that's
guy
not-
high in the range that's been there 18 years. This is this range is like.
I need to interrupt here for just a moment. We need to have the public quiet, not whispering, giggling, laughing. This is a serious discussion and we need your cooperation. Thank you.
I can't get past the fact that we have a nationally recognized partner, an NFP, who works with companies every day in 2023, telling us that this is common industry practice.
I have
Why
no
are we
problem.
questioning their?
Industry practice for
I have
200.
no problem with the matrix. I'm just saying it should be a set band in each range. I think the matrix is a great thing, it just needs to be a set band. And then I think what is most important in this conversation is that up until we asked you to look into doing a merit pay system, people who work at the library were being dragged in these pay scales. So this is something that we asked to be done so that people
We
could
did
be
ask, I'm
properly
on the
rewarded.
committee too, that.
So,
goes with the
so
same.
we're trying to correct something that has caused you to lose employees. If that is the thing, of the people being in the wrong pay band and not making enough money and only getting 3% a year, so we're working diligently to fix this, and if anybody took a job here previously and they felt like they were underpaid, we're definitely trying to work and fix this. And I think this matrix is a good thing. And I just spoke about what I wanted to see, I'm only one vote on this board.
Within their assigned job category, there is no levels in that. They're just there at some salary and they progress whatever the raise is each year. Is that correct?
Right, we have, all of our positions are classified in, job types. So they're classified at different levels based on, the scope of responsibility, based on the education required, based on the work that they do, and they're in buckets, right? These kinds of tasks and skills and duties are in this bucket. And yes, so people, unless they were to change to a completely different job, they would be in that pay range. And I guess, yes.
Is there a cap on the max salary?
Yes,
So they could bump up against that. So if they bumped up against that max cap
Yeah.
salary,
we have a handful.
they would get a zero raise.
What we have done in the past is that we have done a lump sum acknowledgement for those employees because they typically have been here a long time and do good work. But they are at the top of the salary range, and we, the way, Tiffany, to your point, the way that we have addressed some of these things in the past is through doing these regular market-based studies and then adjusting compensation accordingly. So this methodology helps make that not as big a change.
So the company who did our pay bands last year, that they were out of Fort Wayne.
That's
right?
this company.
The same company?
Yes.
Okay, and so does this works with the pay bands?
Yes.
All I say, bring it all together.
Yeah.
Bring together how you're gonna measure people, what your pay bands are, what your matrix is, put it all together into one presentation, and it will probably.
At the risk of belaboring this conversation further, I think. As I look at everybody's faces as we talk about this, I think we all agree that there should be. All those rows, that the exceeds, the meets, the sometimes meets and does not meet, that there should be differentiation in, that is the basis of merit.
Correct.
Tiffany, your problem, I'm just trying to understand where it's coming from. Your problem is that there are multiple columns in this
Correct.
chart. And that people who are lower in the band are gonna be making higher risk. Okay.
Yeah.
But it seems like we're all definitely on board with the multiple rows, that we need a system that protects people from performance. perspective. Okay. Other than Ray, who wants to
No,
rank it 1 to 10.
well, that would be my preferred, because that forces competition, but this may not be the appropriate company.
Industry,
be able-
yeah.
industry to apply that to, because of the fact that there's no ability to move it up in
Vertical mobility is
your
not.
job description.
Within a specific category of job.
I think I think it would be good to take the data we had from last year and pick a number, 4%, whatever, and model it and show it and go through and say, this is how we would do it based on last year's data. This is what it would look like. And we can share that. Maybe we'll share that in an executive meeting, because that is, we're talking about numbers that employee numbers and stuff like that. I don't know if that's, would that be open, or would we have to, could we do that? Yeah.
If it's setting policy, you have to do it.
But if we're reviewing data model of actual employee salaries and people and how this worked out.
And you can review it, you can't take action.
Fine, no, that's what I would do that for.
In the end.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that we're closer together maybe than we thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not my brothers, but.
And then I think from a Robert's perspective, we had a motion that did not have seconds. And so from here, what is our?
You could withdraw.
I withdraw my motion.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
good, thank you.
Thank you, Megan. I appreciate the information.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll be moving on. Next up is the renovation project update, and Greg Drinnen will be doing the presentation. Greg.
Good evening. I believe you have in the board packet, you have information on the front BCC. I appreciate letting me speak
Can you hold
on
that mic?
Kevin's behalf.
Yeah, you can hold it in your hand or you can talk into it.
Okay, I'll just talk to it. If you looked at the board packet, we've had very few changes with regard to change orders in the last 30 days. On Fisher's Library, the only change really occurred today when we're trying to balance out changes related to the teens move area, furniture move. We issued one change order to balance that contract out and the allowance we had related to it. In the phase 1 and 2 projects, Fisher's, both the carpet and the painting in the adult circulation area is about 70% complete. The last, I would say probably the south portion of that area is now being carpeted and painted as we speak. It's got about another 3 weeks left to go. In the glass canopy area, we finally had all the glass canopy installed, and site work on phase 1B south is currently under construction. All of the demolition is complete. The roof has been removed, and all the concrete is being poured for the curbs and underground site utilities. Some of the challenges we're still working through in the north vestibule. We do have some sliding doors to be installed in the next few weeks, and we'll have a roof shut down in order for that to occur. And we're currently working on a coordination of rough in for the lighted wall light panels that will be occurring in the canopy area on the north side. Here in Noblesville, had a minor changes that occurred recently, but we did up on the second floor in the Indiana room area. All of the framing is pretty much complete in that area. We're doing some above ceiling coordination right now. We've got the contractor working with Ferguson Construction. They're pretty well complete with all of that work in the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing rough end. Some of the challenges we're working through right now is really just working with, we're gonna have the interactive space. We're having a meeting in a couple of weeks to bring those folks in, have a face-to-face meeting, to coordinate all the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing relation and rough ends for that work. Work at the, and that was with Solomon Group, so that'll occur just after 4th of July. So, do you have any questions about any more work we've done?
Now, I have a question. Regarding the Noblesville branch, paragraph 2, item A. What is the MEP?
That's mechanical, electrical, and plumbing rough
Okay.
ends.
Any other questions?
Were you involved, were there any costs associated for you and Kevin regarding the flooding? Did you have any of your time captured how much time you spent on that?
Related to that, that was, if you're talking about the roof.
Yeah,
we had
the two
yeah.
flooding events, yeah.
We basically received the information that came from, I think, Bolton's to clean up. That information has been passed directly on to the contractor, and they are working it through their system to basically reimburse and pay directly for that.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, other than just passing it through, you and Kevin didn't have to do any hours involved. I want to capture all costs associated with these events.
Not a great deal more. When we're up here a couple of times during that week, we actually walked the site with the contractor and looked at the areas to try to figure out exactly how it was coming in. I think that's been corrected at this point, so.
Okay, well, like I say, any of these events, we want to make sure we capture all extra costs that we incur.
We document and take pictures as we go, so.
Okay, thank you.
Has the contractor been cooperative for the most part over the last month and a half?
Well, if you're talking about the contractor, for Noblesville or Fishers,
Well, both.
yeah, both have been great. Actually, Fisher's library, the work on the south side is right on track. They're actually about a week ahead of schedule. Start setting, start setting steel for new additions starting Monday. I will say the contractor here, the Indiana room has been really good to work with. Very cooperative, giving a lot of advance notice, and their work has been very good so far. So.
Okay, thank you, Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Greg.
Okay, I'll turn it over to Edra for her director's report.
Okay.
Thanks, Laura. So we'll start with the proposal for the creation of to be determined name parent teacher collection. And I'm going to turn that over to our interim deputy director, Molly Rosowski, who works with the collection services team very closely.
Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
No. You might hold it. Thank you. Sorry for that. Set up. Thank you, Edra. Thank you, board, for your time today as we present what I will just say something resource collection. So when I first put this back together, I actually had caregivers / parents / teachers / every word possible. I did narrow it down, but obviously this is just a working title.
That's okay.
Move forward with whatever. Okay, so I also wanted to say I'm happy to answer questions at any time. If I can't answer, I have members of my team here that might be able to get me some information, or we're happy to follow up afterwards. If there's something we can answer today. Okay, so a little bit of background on how we got here. So Hamilton East has had a teaching resource collection for as long as I have been here, which is 19 years almost. And that collection was always designed to stay in the children's department and to serve the needs of teachers, parents, homeschoolers, anyone interested in finding information that might help support their children's education. So that could be summer bridge workbooks, that could be standardized test prep, any of those kind of common experiences, as well as curriculum. And for some of our more common in school curriculum. So when we started looking at this expanded project, we first took a look at our collection statement for that teaching resource collection. And we found that it just wasn't broad enough for the expanded scope of what we were asked to do here. So from there, we went to looking at what other libraries are doing. We looked at 5 libraries, mostly here in the Midwest, ranging in size from very small to a little bit larger than this. You're actually seeing some of the examples here. The top picture there is Indian Prairie Public Library, which is in Illinois. It's a little bit smaller than us. And the bottom slide picture there is Carmel's current teacher collection. So we went to look at what they do, what their collection statements are, what items they put there, how they manage maintenance and inspection for those. We put all that research together with feedback from the board, as well as from administrations. And we put together the policy there, the project that you have in your document. And that started with a collection statement. So a collection statement is a very common way to start any new collection. We have these for all of our existing collections. Just an easy way for us to understand as a group what we're going to put there, how we're going to maintain it, who's going to be responsible for collection. So we expanded this existing teacher collection statement to be a little broader, to include the additional materials that we were interested in putting into this space. So that is not on top of the teaching items. We are going to add parent materials, so parenting support materials, and also books for children intended to be shared between a parent and a child. We'll see a little bit more about the teaching resources. So our proposal includes relocating that section that we have, our existing teaching resource collection, near this new area. So they will be distinct, but next to each other. We will be developing, again, ignore the word caregiver, whatever resources that next one needs to be there. And these are materials for adults that will help them in all areas of parenting. So anything from just general parenting guides to a very specific situations that somebody might be looking to support their child, grandchild, someone in their life that they are trying to support. And again, those will be all materials. And then we would curate a collection of materials that were intended to share with children. These would come from our children's collection, so primarily our picture books, our early readers, juvenile nonfiction, and any AV. And it would come from, we would build this from a specific set of topics. So those topics include new siblings, human development and reproduction, potty training, emotions, starting school, manners, personal safety and addiction, and death and grief. We may also find that we place materials from the children's collection in this area if they have extensive parent guides or they're really clearly designed to be shared between the parent and the child outside of those. Our proposal includes interfiling the caregiver parent resources with those materials for children by Dewey number. So if you're going to look for books on potty training, you have a one-stop shop. So it's books to share with your child and books for you, as a parent, designed to give you advice on what to do next. Okay, just a little bit about our planned implementation and how we think this would roll out. We have divided it into 4 phases, but I do want to say, don't be scared by the 4 phases. They can happen concurrently, just depending on project load and priorities that we put here. They are mostly divided because different parts of our team need to do different parts of this work. So just help us align it. Phase 1 would be preparing all the things that we need to do on our library database, and also all of the supplies or materials, anything we need to purchase, including shelving and one location. What we would be doing here is mostly our ILS specialist work, so creating material types, location, all those particulars that drive what the catalog shows. We would also be buying stickers, supplies, anything we need to get going. And also in this phase, we would relocate those teaching resources as they're ready to go. So we might add another kind of genre sticker to them, so they're easy to identify, but they wouldn't require a lot of work to move that location. The next phase is what we predict being the largest phase, longest phase. This is actually curating the children's materials. So what we would do here is work between our collection services team, our youth selector, and our youth team to highlight, find, and locate
all of those resources based on those topics or parent guides that we would want to be looking for this collection. The nice thing is leaning into the topics. We can create a list of subject headings, every subject heading that might be associated with any of those topics. And it makes it easiest for us to find those items. So we are using our database tools to help us here. It will go a little bit faster and moving. You can probably use them, even also identify things with a parent guide very easily from like catalog metadata. So again, that can be happening along with phase one, as long as we have the materials in to be able to reprocess them, but highlighting them can definitely be happening. The next section is to curate that adult level collection. So again, it's separated because we would be leaning on our adult material selector to help with this, so separate from our youth team. The same thing that can be happening, identifying those titles can be happening from the beginning. We would also work with our primary vendor to establish protocols for them processing of materials. So we are hopeful that pretty soon within this implementation, we'll be able to have pre-processed materials coming in that saves our teams some work. And finally, phase four, hardly a phase, but that is really just our folding this into our regular collection meetings. So once this collection is established, everybody understands what goes into it, you know how to process and catalog them. We just fold it into regular meetings, cycles, regular selection, everything. It just becomes one of our tasks. We do envision sharing the curation and the selection duties between adult selectors and children's selectors, and it'll be a team building that collection. One other thing I did want to share, next slide, please. So I talked a little bit in the phase one would be building some of the database particulars that are in our library database. And I wanted to highlight how you might find these materials if you're a staff member or if you're a patron. So a couple of ways, we would have a very unique item type and a very unique location. So in any search on our public database, which you're seeing here, or our staff database, you can run an open search, which just means you're going to see everything, and then narrow it down using the filters. So we can train our patrons to understand which item types, which locations they're looking for, and they can limiters and just see that entire section. You can also do that with a topic-based search. So if you just are looking for potty training materials, that's what you want. You know, searching that as a topic, you can see everything we have, and you can again narrow down just what's in that parent and stuff selection. In addition, we'll have those stickers that I mentioned on the side to make it easy to browse. So if you don't want to mess with the catalog, you can just go there and browse. And obviously, staff at the desk are happy to help with any of this. That is very quick overview. What questions?
I have a question. And thank you for your report. What are the labels that you're going to put on the books, like for teachers and then for parents?
Sure. So we went looking at some of the common library vendors for a pre-made sticker that might serve this question. There's like one out there, it has a pacifier on it. It's not great. Yeah, I think everyone would agree on our team. That's not the way to go. So we're proposing using like an alphanumeric. So it would just be, in this case, T for teaching, and it would have red or blue, whatever it is. And then whatever we land on for the title, we would use that letter for the other resources. Again, with a different color. And our shelving staff is very familiar with using like a color-coded system like that for shelving. So I did check with our head of that team, and she's on board with that. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's easy to spot when things are out of place. It's easy to recognize them on the shelf. So
I know you're hands-on with the review process also. So can these two situations go hand in hand, or should one wait until the end?
Well, I think that the answer to that is how quickly you want this to move. We are talking largely the same team that would be doing both projects. I mean, I guess the nice thing is this is a children's project, so like a review selector can be really action to help with this. But you know, some things can always happen concurrently, but we would want to have some guidance on what's the top priority and then structure our workflow.
Okay.
Sure. Regarding the labels, I went to the Carmel Clay Library, and they used, I think, for the parent-child's part of the section, they had white labels for the parent, blue labels for the kids, so that a parent could go in there and say, hey, look, here's some, you can go and look at any of these blue label books and pull them out, because they had graphic type books in terms of, for very young kids. Then they had the teacher section. It was adjacent to it. I would like to see some sort of gap to make it clear, but it was, you could tell, and they had labels. So is that pretty much how it's going to look physically, that there, you'll have the parent and child section, and then you'll have the teacher stuff sort of right next to it?
That is accurate, yeah.
Okay,
Our proposal does not have a different sticker for the parent and child books, but that's certainly something that we can, I mean, they're interfiled by subject, but that's certainly something we could easily do.
yeah, I mean, conceivably, a parent and child could go there and you could let the child pick out some books, and if it's a topic the parent wants to really work with the child on, then that's one way of doing it. Let's see, you said the Dewey Decimal System, is this gonna cause, by creating this section, do we have a sort of a conflict in Dewey Decimal? Do we just, or should we just make this a subject section and be done with it?
Well, so, I mean, we talked about a couple different options, and BISAC is a subject way of doing it. We definitely can do that, but actually our cataloging team has already identified the Dewey numbers we would use for all of these, so.
Okay,
They're very familiar with doing this. Some picture books even already come with a Dewey number. I mean, I feel comfortable we can action that.
that's great. Is there some way too, in our digital sources, to help patrons identify parents? I mean, when you go to Hoopla and the other ones that you use, can you easily identify parent self-help books, or?
So Hoopla is the least friendly for searches like that, but, or for limiting like that. But what we could do is try to mirror this parent collection as a curated collection.
Yeah.
So that would be a staff action. We would have to do that, but we could try to, whatever they have.
I think that as a note to the web team, that when you create the section that describes parent child teacher section. You talk about strategies if you want to go digital to get similar type books. In the digital, it doesn't hurt to.
We do have limited ability to catalog the ebooks. They kind of come to us like they are, but what Molly was talking about, I think was specifically with Overdrive, right? A little bit too, where we would have to, where staff would go in and pull into a collection that we create, the stuff we were doing.
I'm thinking more, yeah, that's a lot. I'm thinking more like, just give them some idea of how.
Like words maybe.
Yeah, how to keep word, the search approaches you might use on each one of these digital systems to do it. And since we're redoing the website, that's something you can add words to. Yeah. And physically, where is it going to be next to the children's section?
So we had those maps last month.
Oh, is that?
Mhm.
Okay.
So here in Noblesville, it's that's where we have to purchase shelving. It would go along the wall.
Okay.
In between the bathroom and the program room. And in Fisher's, the way that the shelving is there's space where we would take the last two sections of shelving and create it there, because we talked about doing it on the wall, but it seems to make more sense to use those last two sections of shelving. We would likely start with the teacher and then go to the parent child.
Isn't that by the window wall?
It's sort of, it's you have like the taller shelves that are in there. It would be the last couple of ranges of those, which is where the nonfiction is, and that is toward the windows, yeah. So where the Mamava is, and it's in that side of the room.
Okay.
Great, thank you very
All right,
much. I
thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
That's great.
Thanks, Molly.
Edna, you have some more that you'd like to address?
So I have a lot in my directing report as always. Do you guys have any questions about anything in here? We do have some budget stuff coming up that I referenced in here. Laura has been working really hard on the audit. We are currently being audited for 21 and 22. But it seems to be progressing pretty well so far. So we're happy that that's going forward. Do you have any questions for me about anything in here?
So on the on page 2, you address the collection development policy operational response. Have you used Kirkus as a review?
Yeah, Kirkus is one of our sources.
Okay, I don't think I've seen them in any report at all, like, we've seen some of the other review sources.
Like just listed as an option. Oh, okay, because Kirkus is a pretty common library review source along with Library Journal and Publishers Weekly, School Library Journal, etc. Yeah.
Because we're using, common sense media.
Kirkus is a review source. It's not a content identifier source, so it would be used in the same way.
Okay,
But it's a great source for reviews.
okay,
I hope that answers your question. Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah, I thought the portrait that you're talking about, I think that's a really good choice. I looked up her background. The poet spent 70 years living in Indianapolis. It's great. So will the board have a chance to review it sometime soon? When is this being produced?
I believe that the artist is creating it now. We can provide some of the pictures that she's working from. Again, it's going to be a head, like a head portrait, like neck up. But I think I've got a couple of reference photos, but as far as like what it's going to look like,
It's just going to be a portrait. There's no words or slogans or anything on it.
As far as I know, it's going to be in the style of her other portraits of similar kind. So
And then,
unless that's.
Then we probably need to get, start working on what the plaque is going to say or what the informational stuff is, we're going to put next to it.
Yeah, I think it would be very similar to what you would see in a museum. So like it would say the artist and the subject and then some information about who funded it, etc. So I'll put
We
that
have
out.
a section where we try to get a whole bunch of her books somewhere near where this portrait is going to be.
I don't know that we have a plan to do that, but it could be something that we do as a feature, like when we would unveil it, that could be part of the whole thing.
I think initially that you should consider.
Have some kind of event. Mhm. Yeah, certainly. I did want to point out that we have staff day, like we're planning on doing that in, what is it, September? And that will be a day we're closed. So if there's no objections, I'll just bring an updated closings and holidays. Policies.
What days is that day?
It is October, I can't remember. I think it's like it's the 6th, it's October 6th. Thank you. We're not, I don't believe we're aligning it with any kind of holiday. And that's a Friday because it's a shorter day for us. So we figure it's less hours that we're closed.
So again, like I mentioned to Greg, what about the time you spent and your staff in terms of cleaning up the floods? We should capture those hours.
We have, we can certainly fairly easily do that. We also have the amount of cost, like what materials were damaged and what those costs are as well. We have all that captured.
We need all of that.
We need like pain and suffering.
Yeah.
That was really hard for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I was at the farmer's market that day and I was talking to some people. It was the day that they did the big mental health display and everybody's at the farmer's market and these people were walking by and they had the grandkids with them and they're like, we're gonna go to the library now. And I was like, oh. But then I told them, I said, oh, you're gonna go to the Noblesville Library. And they said, do our library cards work there? And he's like, yeah, they do. So I just thought that was interesting that they weren't, I'm sure that they had two.
Yeah, we get that question a lot at farmers market. Which library? I have a membership. Where can I go?
So I'm curious if there's anything special being planned for Independence Day.
So what we have, we don't have any special events. We are participating in the Spark Fishers this weekend, which is not technically Independence Day, but has always been, that's in lieu of. So we are going to be participating in that. The library will be closed, but we'll have a booth at the community event. We also have one of our librarians created a blog for Independence Day that is going to be posted. She did quite a bit of research and put together, quite a lot of background information, and she found it quite interesting. She's a good writer, so it'll be posted, I believe, at the end of June.
I'm really impressed with the amount of community presence that the library has. I was at the Juneteenth celebration on Monday. And my favorite historian, David Highway, was there. And he was giving people information about the African-American troops who were part of the Civil War, and where they're buried, and how they're trying to put all that information together. And when he shares that information about the history of Hamilton County, it just really amazes people that Hamilton County was one, so diverse, and so much harmony in the county years and years ago. So it's nice that he was able to share that.
And David's been involved, and the library too, involved in the Juneteenth celebrations that we've had here in the county since I think the beginning. And David always does, we always do a Juneteenth blog that David puts together, and they do vary. He doesn't just post the same one every year. Yeah, there's plenty of great history of mine in those blogs.
And that's the thing that's so interesting is he's talking about, oh, we're finding this and we're finding that. And I'm like, it's history. How are you finding this? But he's just always searching. It seems like there's always something new that he's able to uncover.
Once we
and
get
share.
disparities be online, I think there'll be a lot of opportunity for special exhibits and a lot more scope for David's history in that space.
Yeah, so it's really great. Good community presence.
Yeah, Julia Wilson, who was our featured employee last month, has done a really wonderful job of connecting with community organizations and making sure that the library has a presence everywhere we can. And I think that we, for our size and in our county, I think we're unique in the number of community events that we attend as a staff.
Yeah, it's really great. And even better when you have the little vehicle.
We have her, exactly.
And I know Laura sent the email to the board about David was honored by the
Yeah.
Hamilton County Leadership Academy, and so I was at that luncheon and he was at the table next to me, but I was next to a celebrity.
I thought they should let him say a few words, right?
Yes, everybody was waiting to hear more about the squirrels, like.
Yes,
We
that's-
always want to hear more about the squirrels.
Right. He's in charge of. We're lucky to have him.
Definitely. Any questions or comments about the director's report? Okay, we'll move on to old and new business, and we still have to cover the review committee recommendation for the Y book. And this was moved to this meeting since you were absent last month, so would one of you be here? So
Before we do that, one last thing, I guess it's because it's in the director's report. You made a comment about using the cost of using Hoopla to do, or using some sort of digital review, a book and do the review versus the manual. And yeah, I agree, it might be a cost to access that digital book, but then you have to look at what is the cost of manually flowing through the book.
The challenge is if we are looking at an ebook, what are we looking for? So the policy that we are primarily reviewing for, we have these categories of content. And especially for different kinds of content, there's not just a set of keywords that we can look for to zero in on that picture or zero in on that page that has for example, we have books that we're moving because there is a single sexual encounter on one page of a 300-page book that's written for high school students that is about first love or whatever. And there are no like obvious keywords in there. I mean, when you read the page, it is clear, it is on the page that there is a sexual encounter. But if we searched for keywords, touch, feel, love, kiss, it wouldn't narrow that down all that much. So that's kind of the concern there. But I
just wanted to make sure the cost equation was correct.
but to your point, it would be the cost of buying one book, right? Which is about the same as 1 hour of someone's time, right? I get what you're saying, totally get what you're saying.
We didn't limit kiss from kissing.
No, the point is that we're
Usually
trying to
it's
identify.
Trying to make.
Yeah, no, not
Where
at all.
kiss shows up, you might end up in a section that has.
Right.
That's not in the policy.
No, but if we're trying to identify
Okay.
different things that would,
Okay.
the keywords would be top.
Number. Okay.
No, that is not.
Okay.
Okay, now we're ready for the old.
Sorry, my
Okay.
apologies.
So I will accept a motion for approval of the review committee reports and recommendations, so we can move to discussion.
I will make a motion to approve.
Second,
All right, is there discussion, question?
I just want to thank Craig for, and Brad and the patron who participated in this new experience for the first time. And they have set the bar very high for an extremely thorough and logical process and report. So thank you, Craig.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I thought it was brilliant.
I actually sat in on the discussion and I found it very interesting. Everyone was fully engaged. They did their homework, they came prepared, so I was glad to see it all, you know, in motion coming together.
Brad and Aaron were fantastic.
So I have
Oh, go ahead.
I have a question. So based on the creating the parent-teacher resource section, would you say that you still want to see this in the children's section, or would you want to see this in the parent-teacher resource section?
Well, I guess I came at this, I wasn't where I wanted to see it. It's I had a policy and me and the other review members sat down and read the book and we applied it to existing policy. Whether it could be included in the review section, or not the review section, the parent teacher section. I don't know, but the scope of our question was does it meet this policy? We found that it did.
So I have a question, with regard to violence. The policy defines it as repeated purposeful conduct that injures the body or property of another in a manner that would be a crime under Indiana law, or the incitement of another to engage in purposeful conduct that injures the person or property of another in a manner that would be a crime under Indiana law. So I know you talked about that there was one page of talking about burning buildings, but it didn't say burning a building, it said burning buildings plural. So that to me is more than one building is burning, and therefore there's more than one episode of violence. It would be repeated. So I think that should be looked at.
And we kind of wrestled with this in I described it in the memo, so there is some ambiguity with the term repeated. Are we talking about repeated instances? Are we talking about repeated scenes? Are we talking about it inferring, I think as you have, since buildings quote are that more than one crime has happened. And so as applied to this book, there is some facial ambiguity there, but we found the most sensible way was to look at scenes. So in this book, we had a few pages where that was addressed, but we said, okay, we look at this as a story. It was a single scene in this book. So we found that it wasn't repeated as the policy would be repeated.
well, I read your review of it, and you stated that rioting and arson was presented in an age appropriate way. Rioting is not appropriate in any way. Having a parent agree that sometimes you have to burn buildings down is not age appropriate. The book has been reviewed as appropriate for K through second grade. The book builds the case that violence and anger is sometimes justified, and ends with a parent statement, not just some person, a parent statement that people are justified in burning buildings. The nuanced nature of the conversation is lost on children that young. This would be an excellent book for a parent-teacher section, grouped with other books that discuss race issues. It should not be a standalone book for young children in a children's section. So I would recommend that this book would be a good example of a book that would have a good home in the parent-teacher section, but not in the children's section.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it's K through second grade. that's a pretty deep subject, and I think it's something certainly children need to learn at some point, but parents, I think, we moved in on that conversation.
I agree.
So I guess my question would be, I mean, the committee had to look at the policy as it exists, and the policy kind of has two general categories of items it wants to, I guess for lack of a better word, avoid or regulate. One says the sexual stuff we've talked about a lot, and that says, okay, no matter what, no matter how many times, no matter the context, that's out. Like Edgar said, one page, it's gone. Then we have the other categories, we said, okay, so we're looking at these in an age appropriate element, and it's not a per se violation of the policy. So I guess what Ray is suggesting that the policy that violence or specifically rioting in this circumstance should be moved out of the factor into the complete knockout list, which is not how I read the policy as written now, but pretty much what I heard Ray say is rioting can never be age appropriate. I guess I'm not viewing that in our current policy.
Well, I think for me, it's the fact that it's K through second grade. I mean, do you think that it's an appropriate book if a second grader picked that up off the shelf? Would you say, okay, without parents there, would you say they're gonna be able to process that in a way that doesn't encourage them to go out and burn down buildings in Noblesville, or like, I mean, I'm curious, I'm asking the question, I just wanna know from Craig, like, and if not, then maybe we can.
Excuse me, I would like for the audience to please remain quiet while we have this discussion. Thank you.
So I guess the question I would have for you is, in all seriousness, is there how can we adjust the policy so that, or do you think it should be adjusted?
So here's what I think is that us as a board, I viewed our job as the review committee to decide if the book meets the policy. And if so, we make the recommendation because it's the board for a full vote. And I feel if the board is reviewing a book, we should be able to point to a section in the policy that says, okay, this book was placed improperly and doesn't meet the policy, or other mechanisms for catching this didn't catch it. So I feel like if we're going to vote a book essentially out of the children's section, it needs to be based on the policy. It's not something to look at some mechanism outside of the policy to catch a book that we otherwise don't like, but really doesn't violate the policy.
To my point, when it's talking about burning buildings plural, that to me is more than one incident of violence, and therefore it could be construed to meet our foundation on what is violence.
Because I would view that as a hyper-technical way to look at it. That's probably not the best way to look at it. For instance, let's say a scene in a Nancy Drew book has a burglary. Well, a person has trespassed, they've walked in, maybe they've brought an entrance, criminal mischief, they've taken something that's theft. Even though it's one scene of burglary, we identified 3 crimes there. So does that mean Nancy Drew is up in the adult section?
But Craig, there's a big difference here. That's a scene in a crime scene that's describing something in a novel is not the same as a parent talking to the child and saying that rioting and anger and burning is sometimes justified. We're talking about a parent saying that in the book.
But the point of the book was her response to that.
After
Everything else, she's just like, oh, but after that.
That's one page.
Her point
It's
becomes very sad, very upset, and be aspirational that not be.
And that's why it needs to be in a parent teachers section, because a parent sitting down.
And Ray, that's fine, but that's what Craig's point is. Craig's point is that under the policy as it's written, it meets the policy. Whether it should go in this new collection that we're developing, that's question 2.
And I think, I agree with that. I think I'm asking you, Craig, so do we need to adjust the policy then in some way, shape or form? So that way we can, make sure that this isn't shelved in the right place.
Well, what I'm hearing from Ray is that his feeling is that if rioting is in a book and it's per se inappropriate and per se doesn't meet the policy, that's not how I read the policy. So I think the review committee's job is to apply the policy, and the board's job is to also apply the policy. And if feel like we need to move a book, but we can't describe how it violates the policy, then there's some incongruity there. We're just kind of setting our librarians up for failure.
And I agree with that. So that's why I think we've got to nail this down, policy wise, and then to your point, make sure that the committees stick with the policy. We're not asking you to see between the lines, the policy needs to be clear, but I think for me, I think on this book, just the fact that it's addressed to such a young audience. If this was a teen book, I don't think that's out of the realm of comprehension for a teen to understand this, but when it's, K through second grade, I do think a parent needs to, be there to field these questions of, oh, so is it okay to burn the building? Okay, well, if it is, then when's the right time to do that? And that's an adult conversation to have for sure, so.
I think Andre makes an excellent point, though, that the child is not incited to violence. Like you said, I think I hear a couple of you saying that this book incites violence among children. The child spoke of peace and prayer on the very next page.
Sure.
Was the child incited to violence in the story?
No,
And it is a fictional story.
Right. And I'm just
Just like
saying,
Nancy Drew is a fictional story.
right, so hey, so that's what I'm saying, I think we need to nail down the policy and just make sure that if it's okay.
Are we gonna change this policy every time we disagree
No,
with the
no, I don't
recommendation?
think, I don't agree that we have to work with the product. There's enough in this book, there's enough elements of this book that it is, as a teaching book, a standalone teaching book, it's not acceptable because it's nuanced what they're talking about to be acceptable for K through second grade. This is a great book to have for a parent in the parents section. And I think we can argue whether it meets the legal definitions that we have in our policy, or we can look at it and say, hey, it's pretty close. It's talking about rioting, arson. These are all legally not permissible things, which is part of the policy. So why can't we make a decision to say there's a good home for it that we created in the parent teacher section, and it will be a valuable book for the parents to use with their children?
I think we've agonized over this language in this policy, so I think we owe it to our staff to try to apply it. So we have our staff, we've made this detailed policy, analyzing how we're gonna place material in the library. They dutifully apply it, and then the book comes up and go, well, I don't know, it doesn't quite violate the policy, we're gonna toss it out anyways. I feel
Well,
like we're just setting the library up for failure.
I think that there's a collection development policy, and there's also the way that the book was brought to our attention. There was a lady in the children's section, and her child pulled it off the shelf, and she did not think that that book was appropriate for children to read on their own. So I do think it's important to understand how we got to this conversation, and it had nothing to do with the collection development policy. It was just that that's where the book was. A child picked it up, and the mom thought that it was in the wrong place, and she did the correct policy. She did a request for proposal, and she was told that it was appropriately shelved, and then we did our further review. But I just think it's important that we were not seeking this book to review it. A parent brought it to our attention.
And I guess I looked at our policy, it says when you're applying a request for reconsideration, it's the same factors as when you are originally placing it. It's not a different standard just because someone brought it to our attention. We're looking, okay, did a book make it to the cracks? Are we looking at a book that we just missed somehow that doesn't violate the policy?
I think you make an excellent point. This book is now passed through 2 layers of review. There was the original review and now the new review, and it's passed both reviews.
All I was saying is that a parent brought it to our attention.
Well,
That's
sure,
all.
and
I
that's
just wanted to make sure that everybody understood why we had to do this. A parent asked us. That's all.
So I have a question for Frank. If we had the parent teacher section in place when you were doing your committee work on this book, what would you have recommended that go there?
Well, I have to see, like we were talking about today, we have to have a policy, we have to have a policy saying this goes here and that goes there, and we can make a recommendation. I've said a few times, I think the purpose of this is to make sure a book that's been brought to our attention actually meets our policy.
And it's shelved in the right place.
Those are synonyms in my mind, I guess.
So if you at that time had to choose between the children's section or the parent teacher section, what would you recommend?
I can't answer that in time of policy for the parent teacher section.
Okay, shall we make a motion here on this?
We got a motion and a second
Okay,
to approve the committee report.
Okay.
So, okay, let's go forward with the vote. And this will be to place the book back where it was originally shelved. Is that correct?
To approve the committee report would be to keep.
Right.
Keep it
Okay.
back, Jill, a second.
All right, so all in favor of keeping the book in children's section, say yeah.
I,
Opposed? Nay. Okay,
I'd like to make a motion that the book Y be placed in the new parent teacher a section that the library has created.
okay, all in favor, say aye.
Uh,
Yeah, we got it.
discussion.
okay, okay, go ahead.
So what we discussed with the election committee later never actually went through the motion. We didn't actually make it policy. We haven't appended it to our collection development policy. It's not policy, and so I think your motion, while it might be valid at some future date, is premature.
The section doesn't exist to move the book to.
Would it be more appropriate to say?
Yeah.
No, we didn't vote on that, did we?
Voted to create it at the last.
Yes.
Okay, okay. So now is this, so to Molly's point, now does this parent, whatever it's called, I don't know how we're
Parent teacher.
determining that. But is this top priority now? Because now we're moving books to a
That's
section that doesn't exist yet.
That's a separate decision. As to
What's a
what-
separate
As
decision?
to what is the priority.
Right,
We didn't get that.
Right, but we're moving books to the section now.
we're moving one book.
We're
We are moving a book to
Board
the
is
section.
suggesting one book be moved.
I
So
think
where
that
does it
we're,
go
we're still in,
tomorrow?
I think she's in phase 1, phase 2, prepare internal systems for a new collection. And then phase 2 was select youth materials from the existing collection. And though these things can occur at the same time, I think that this is definitely a phase 2 operation, and we have just identified the book.
Yeah,
So
so we haven't
if I
started
remember
anything yet, but yes, that would be a
Phase
phase 2. And in language for you, Ray, if it was a project thing, these would be happening at the same time.
Yeah.
So where does the book go tomorrow?
That's what Ray's motion is.
But there's no section.
That's why I say it's.
There's a
Well,
teacher section. There is a teacher section.
That's not what the motion was. The motion was to, and
Okay, since we need a home for the book, I will modify my motion to move the book to the teachers, currently existing teachers section. And when the parent teacher section is completed, to move it to the parent side of that section.
So do we need a new motion?
Yeah, I think you
Okay.
just made a new motion. We ought to have a second.
Okay, second.
This is the first motion. Is this just amending the first
Withdrew it.
motion?
I withdrew
Withdrew
it,
it,
created the new one. Exactly.
Okay. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
nay.
Okay, motion carried to move the book to the teacher section. Move on to the block video cameras. I will accept a motion for approval of the installation of block video cameras.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, sorry.
Okay, is there discussion or questions? Michelle, I think you have
Yeah.
some.
Yes,
information to
I
share.
shared some information with all of you. I had a simple email conversation with Dan Murdoch, which is the sales representative that Edgar's been speaking to, and I wanted to ask some questions about the types of entities that are purchasing and placing these cameras. So we had a series of questions, which I shared with all of you. I just wanted to read a couple of things and share a couple of examples he gave me. So when I asked what type of entities, he said it's mostly law enforcement, that there are some schools, parks, public transit, museums, or other government entities. And so when I kind of pushed him on that, I'll get back to the government entities piece, but he did explain that it's common for private business, HOAs, airports, including our own here in Indianapolis, the Motor Speedway, college campuses such as IU, Purdue, and Ball State to have these cameras. When I pushed him a little bit on the government entities piece and trying to understand that better, particularly in terms of libraries, he was able to mention 2 libraries in the nation. San Marino, California, and a library system in Gwinnett County, Georgia. He also said that there are several others where there are cameras placed in city services complexes that might include a library, like a courthouse, a city hall that might have a library on the same property. So that's my report in terms of facts, just as one voting member of this board. I understand the utility of the cameras. I don't believe them to be a library expense. So I just would like for conversation around what specific library problem are we looking to solve with these cameras specifically? Because I would prefer to take a more diagnostic approach to security in general in the library. And we talked with law enforcement about the #1 way to protect patrons, staff, board members is training, awareness, and learning how to be alert and respond to situations. So I would much prefer to invest in training, things like the trauma kits they talked about, and security within the library. And we
Trash cans.
sounds like deals. So security upgrades to our library infrastructure. I know others talked about upgrading cameras inside the library. So I just want to open that up for some discussion.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear more about the other options, indoor and outdoor cameras.
Have we run this by other law enforcement, or are they, I mean, do they say go flock, or would they be okay
They
with?
would like flock, yeah.
That's their recommendation is.
They brought the idea forward.
Okay.
And we
It's the industry standard for the license plate readers, and the network is of great value to law enforcement.
I mean, yeah, and we
Right.
do have a lot of,
It has public safety value, and it's used by law enforcement in a variety of different ways. I know that it relates and has evidentiary value, in even some cases that are currently pending in this county. In addition to saving people who have dementia and are driving around because they don't know where they're going, and being separated from somebody they're following. So there's definitely utility to it. The problem that I have, and this is, understand that I was the deputy prosecutor and chief deputy prosecutor in this county for 15 years. This has great law enforcement value. The concern I have is that it's part in Noblesville, Fishers, Arnold, all of our agencies have great budgets, but they always could be better. And this is a way of decentralizing law enforcement costs to cooperative partners in the community. And so to me, the question is whether we want to be one of those partners. So there's a value to, I think one of our municipalities even asks that their HOAs, when they're platting a new, some new subdivision, they're saying, look, have flock cameras. That's actually part of the deal coming in. They're having that conversation, trying to get in there because of the value it has from a law enforcement public safety perspective. So I think, I don't know that anybody here is against public safety. No one's against not helping law enforcement. It's just a matter from a fiscal perspective. Is this the right government body to engage in? Because what we're doing is we're putting law enforcement materials on our property to support law enforcement. It's not as though Edra and her staff get to go in and see that I drove in or I drove out. They're going to get a flag if sex offender comes on, or if somebody in a stolen car comes on, or if somebody who is wanted in a burglary is driving through.
yeah. One thing to consider is we have a lot of children in the library and going, sometimes parents drop them off. And so having, and nothing's happened, thank God, but and if it ever did, this would be, we capture the car, we capture the license plate.
Yes,
That's a big deal.
And we are a public entity too, so we work with law enforcement probably a little closer just because it's a government entity and so I can see it justified for spending the money. I think I would say it's worth it personally. So,
It's 60, what was our, 60% of the tax opinion is what we're saying today.
But I think that I agree with training, you know, I was in the military and, you know, I know how to do things if somebody, you know, gets hurt and I can definitely stop bleeding. But I think things like trauma kits, those are very reactive. And your flock cameras are gonna be a bit more proactive. And I think if I were ever harmed and it could have been prevented, I don't really want a Band-Aid. I want to know a lot more about what could have been done up front. I do think that with the flock cameras, it does give us an opportunity to understand who's coming in and out of the library. And if by any chance, to Ray's point, something did happen, we would at least be able to understand who drove onto the property and be able to find them. This is a public place. We don't know who comes in and out of here. You don't have to have a library card to come here. We've had incidents here and you don't know who is here. I mean, people are taking chances. We had that meeting with Chief Gephardt and we talked about how much security we don't have here. And I think it's probably the easiest and smartest thing for us to do. And to the point about being another government entity, I have no problem with us doing our part for public safety.
I honestly don't know the answer to this, and maybe you sound knowledgeable about this specifically, but if someone drives onto library property with a criminal record, and
So my understanding of the way the system works is certain license plates can be flagged in the system. And they can create an alert that alerts local law enforcement of the presence of that vehicle.
so if someone's wanted, they can address that.
If they've gone so far as to dig down and connected that person to their registered vehicle and entered that license plate in. There's a few links in there that may or may not happen. It's most often as I think he was, Mr. Murdoch was relaying, most often when you're dealing with stolen vehicle, a specific APB that's been put out, you know, something very specific. Amber alerts, like things very specific to a car. I don't know, and I'm not going to put Deputy Chief Cunningham on the spot to answer if he knows about whether I don't believe that every case, every person who's wanted has their vehicle being put on. I don't think that happens. I would like everybody to think that happens, please. If you want to, please turn yourself in and come to jail.
Or if your license plate is ever stolen, report it.
Right, and so there's value there, but there have to be some steps taken by law enforcement to have that alert created.
So we'd be tracking vehicles.
We wouldn't be.
I mean, it would just track.
My understanding is it would just
It goes to the police
The
department.
light, right,
yeah.
they get that data.
And
But
it would not, in my opinion, as a librarian, it would not be ethical or appropriate for us to have a list of people coming and going onto and off of library property, just to look at, to see who's here. But to have, you know, and we would, exactly.
Yeah.
But I think that, you know, we have cameras, we have security cameras in the building and to the
We have
premises
them
already. There's some, mostly that are on entrances to the library. I just, my concern is kind of, you know, we're the library, our tax rate is like itty, and the city's tax rate is great big, and we're putting our money into law enforcement cameras, but you know, I get what everybody's saying. But but I just want to be clear that we're not going to be like we're going to be watching these cameras and having a list. We're not.
No, the
monitoring.
information is reported and held for 6 months.
It's available to law
And it's available
enforcement.
to law enforcement if something were to happen.
Yeah.
And it's a way for us to be proactive instead of reactive.
I don't know how proactive it is.
Would
but-
we not want to complete,
Collecting information.
I know we've begun an assessment of overall security in the library. So would we not want to finalize that assessment and see what those expenses look like before we do this? Because I don't see security inside the library as reactive. I think we can be proactive about security and safety inside the library, and we should be.
It's gonna take a while to do a security assessment, because what we need to do is a complete building assessment and determine where do we need cameras, you know, are they pointed in the right spot? Do we need to upgrade our access systems, et cetera? And that's that takes a long time.
Have you ever had a security assessment?
Not since I've been here. We've had, we have a system in place and we have cameras in place and those have worked. That have worked for us. But it is time, you know, they're getting older. It's time to upgrade that system, but that's something that we're gonna have to do over a number of months.
Yeah, Edward, do you have someone who you would turn to do that?
Don't, actually, I have reached out to colleagues and also, you know, we've got a couple of names of people that that are local who do this kind of work. We're just in the very beginning stages of that. My preference would be to work with an expert to help us craft an RFP to get the work done. The budget for it for next
I
year.
think we should have that cost and that system cost and to see. Because if we could have better camera coverage inside the building.
It's going to be expensive, I'll just tell you that.
Yeah,
And we might have an opportunity to have better camera coverage outside the building.
right. And if the system's old, then it's likely the hardware needs to be upgraded to get higher resolution. So it's I think it's worthwhile that we've got one proposal that does one part of the security. And I think we should, I think it's a good idea to get a security confirmed.
And we're working, but my understanding is yes, but I don't.
Andre, do you have it? I mean, you were.
I would hesitate to call flock cameras security for purposes of the library. They are an
I understand that.
investigatory tool for law enforcement.
Right.
And our purchase of them would be as a community partner with our law enforcement.
It would not have library utility for our.
And it has limited libraries nationally. There are two that he referenced that have done this. So I don't think we would be a poor community citizen if we didn't do this as the library. Libraries are not investing in this.
Libraries are very soft targets.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if we go back to that conversation that we had, I think we should really handle this in an executive session. Because there's a lot that we're talking about that probably should not be spoken about in this type of public forum.
Okay.
I'll leave that there.
So should we remove our motion? Should we remove the motion?
Motion we withdrawn.
Okay. Who made
Gotcha. I figured we did.
Tiffany made it.
Okay, withdrawn. Okay, all right. All right, we'll move forward with the project progress reports, the CRDC project and the website redesign project.
I provided a written report with the, where we are on those projects. I will say just as a quick update on the website project and this, I guess I have a quick update on both since my report went out. So I believe that Greg touched on this in his report from LWC, but we are meeting in person with Solomon Group and Ferguson, our contractor, to go over on-site needs to get the infrastructure in for those exhibits as they're building them. So that's happening in the next couple of weeks. So that project's going well. We're having good meetings with Solomon on a regular basis, and we feel very confident that that is on track. The website project, we just had a meeting this week to talk about tone and voice of our website, the way you feel when you come to our website. And we saw some of the preliminary wireframing and it looks really good. So a lot of good work happening there too.
On the CRDC work, have you missed, has the schedule had any missed milestones or deliverables?
No.
Okay, any change orders from them and requests for change order?
No.
Okay. And how are you doing the estimate of work complete? You're looking at what the line item is and estimating that way? Each one?
So it's a little more complicated than that. We're looking at, like, I'll use the website as an example. So there are a lot of different tasks and deliverables in that RFP. And what Iconic is giving us is how far they are through each one of those. And then we're doing math to figure out where that is on.
Okay, so you're taking the percent complete, multiplying it times the cost for each task and coming up with.
Yeah, basically, we have, this task is 30% of the project and they're 10% complete. So what is that of the whole project?
Right.
That kind of thing.
No,
Yeah.
that's sort of an earned value approach, which is good.
And we've worked with Iconic for years and they're a good partner. for us.
Yeah, those are just the questions I'm gonna ask this time.
Okay.
Milestones and deliverables.
That's why there's a written report down.
Yes. How about the outreach fans? That didn't let.
I believe that's still out. We haven't received, we've gotten very positive response to the RFP, but we haven't gotten the responses yet, if that makes sense. The vendors are interested, but we haven't closed it. I don't believe.
What did they do?
I don't remember. Yeah,
Top of my head.
soon, yeah.
Did you say that'd take a year, those vans?
Yes.
Okay.
So for next summer, we'll be in good shape.
Right.
Okay. Are there any other questions about the project? Okay. We'll move on to comment from the public. We do have 20 people that signed up. So we will reduce the time to 2 minutes each. And I'd like to give the members of the public who have signed up to do so the opportunity to speak. We will limit this portion of the meeting to accommodate all of you, but at 2 minutes each. Please keep your comments respectful. Do not address board members, our legal team, or staff individually. You're given 2 minutes to speak to the entire board. That will not disparage our board members, legal team, or staff, nor our security team, or guest speakers. This is a business meeting held in the public, and we expect your cooperation on this. If you exhibit unseemly behavior, you may be asked to leave. If you do not leave, upon my request, you'll be escorted out of the building by our police officers. Okay. First up is Shirley Nachu. If I pronounced it correctly. You're not hearing. Okay. Olivia Hayek.
Would you like me to stay here?
Right there.
Good afternoon, library board members. My name is Olivia Hychak.
Sorry.
Is that microphone on?
Good afternoon, library board members. My name is Olivia Hychak. Sometimes when libraries try to align their content policy with community standards, they're met with some pretty serious accusations, like free speech violations, book banning, and censorship. These arguments come up a lot when books are brought to light that normalize and promote perverse sexual acts to minors. I'd like to take a closer look at a few of these arguments now. First, let's think about free speech in the context of libraries. Now, I can't just take a book off the library shelves and attribute that book's message to the library. Well, why not? Well, it's because the book isn't the speech of the library, it's the speech of the author. Authors don't have a First Amendment right to have their books in public libraries, and so it's really not a free speech issue. Second, let's take a look at book banning. What does it mean for something to be banned? Well, when abortion is banned, no one can legally access it, whether they pay for it or not. If TikTok is banned, no one can legally access it, whether they pay for it or not. The library does not have the authority to ban books, only to decide which ones it will make available to its patrons at taxpayer expense. If a book were actually banned, a library couldn't put it on its shelves if it wanted to. Censorship, on the other hand, means deciding what information people may and may not access. The library does not have the authority to decide this. It does not control schools, bookstores, publishers, internet, or other libraries. All a library can decide is what materials it will make available to its patrons at taxpayer expense. This isn't censorship, book banning, or violating anybody's rights. I'll stop it.
Okay, thank you. I do want to make a comment. that we are not banning or censoring books in this library. The library books are available for any card holder to check out at any time. Okay, we're gonna move on to Omar Havenman. I'm sure I got it right.
Hi.
Hi.
Let's start again.
Sorry, I'm trying to turn that alarm off.
And my name is Omar Khalid Mohammed Mustafa Habayeb, and I want to express my appreciation to the board of directors for serving. I know it's a thankless job, so thank you for doing that. Thank you to the library, to employees for everything you do. I'm a product of the public library system, and I appreciate it very much. And I guess I'm here. I also appreciate all the folks that are here passionate about something that is affecting locally where they live, work, and play. So it's nice seeing a packed house on a evening night. So I guess I'm here primarily because I am in favor of moving books out of a children's section that are inappropriate sexually. I guess the psychological pedophilia involved in those books, I think it's the right decision to move them out of the children's section. When I look at the elementary and middle school, whether it's gay sex or straight sex, I think it's a good idea to keep those things separate. So I applaud the policy of moving those and making some distinctions regardless of the cost, because the innocence of childhood needs to be protected. And that's why I'm here today, to stand up for children and their innocence. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Omar.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is Cindy. I just said.
Good evening. Obscenity is a legal term from Indiana code that applies to certain kinds of materials that appeal to an unwholesome interest in sex. Obscenity is always illegal for everyone, even in libraries. Harmful matter to minors is similar to obscenity, but it is not illegal for adults. Giving harmful matter to minors is a felony, but libraries have a defense to prosecution for the time being. The courts can sort out what counts as obscene or harmful to minors, and the legislature can sort out who has to follow these laws. But thankfully, you have the authority as a library board to hold your content to higher standards than the bare minimum to avoid a felony. You are not legally required to include materials that normalize and promote perverse sexual acts. Some people say that if libraries remove harmful sexual content, that may also ban the Bible by the same token. But libraries don't have the authority to ban the Bible. All they can do is remove it from their shelves for their patrons. And they can't choose the consequences of that decision. If a library removed the Bible, it could jeopardize public confidence. And under Indiana code, that's actually a good reason for a governing body to remove a board member that they appointed. Also, there's nothing legally that says you have to remove the Bible that condemns perverse sexual acts just because you remove materials that normalize and promote perverse sexual acts. You can leave it to the courts to sort out what obscenity means, but in the meantime, I support your efforts to hold the Hamilton East Public Library to a higher standard. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Anja Miller.
My name is Rhonda Miller. I'm the president of Purple for Parents. As many know, our organization has been fighting obscenity and pornography in our schools for many years in our public libraries. In researching the origins of the agenda to groom our children, I discovered the 45 communist goals. Nearly half of these goals address the family, education, pornography, obscenity, and the weaponization of mental health. It is these goals by which the communist agenda of sexualizing our children and destroying our families have taken hold throughout our state and the nation. In The Secret Circle, written by Claire Chambers, not only are the sex crimes of Alfred Kinsey exposed, which is the basis for today's pornography, but also the destruction of our moral fabric by humanists, Marxists, and communists. The reality is that our society's moral foundation has been under attack for many decades, and sadly, pornography and obscenity is one of their weapons. Dr. For humanist Dr. G. Brock Chisholm has said, the people who have been taught to believe whatever they were told by their parents are the menace of the world. Dr. Chisholm was head of the World Federation of Mental Health and later became the head of the Communist World Health Organization, an arm of the United Nations. In order to understand how these obscene books made their way into our public libraries, one must understand the communist connection. Under communist ideology, family and morality must be eradicated, and one way they are succeeding in hooking our children on destructive behaviors through obscenity and pornography. It is through these obscene materials that children are led down a path for further addictions. Statistics show that access to pornography and obscene content through books severely impacts children's brain development. Neural pathways are altered and lifetime implications of self-destructive behaviors become reality, therefore negatively impacting family structure. Books that are not only obscene, but also refer children to porn sites, porn authors, and sexually explicit websites are intentionally written, published, awarded, and distributed with one goal in mind: destruction of American culture through our children. I'm here tonight to stand alongside you in protecting innocent children from obscene and pornographic content. I want to commend you for your efforts.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Kathleen Weiner. Kathleen. All right, next is Maureen Morgan.
Good evening. I support the collection development policy. And I applaud the library board and the staff for standing firm with that policy, even despite the opposition. One has to ask what the motive is for those who are fighting against this policy. Protecting the innocence of children, it should be a priority for the whole community. Why would anyone contend it's right for a 4-year-old or 5-year-old to look at pictures about various sexual parts and positions? It's up to adults to protect eyes of children from viewing material that immature brains are just not designed to process. Some argue that this violates our right to free speech. Yes, our First Amendment allows for freedom of speech, but the Constitution was not written to endorse pornography in children. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. And that's not in the First Amendment. It's not specifically prohibited, but it's understood that it would be wrong. When written, the Constitution expected common sense and decency among citizens. We're wrestling to keep that today with this policy. Studies show that viewing pornography is like a gateway drug, and it leads a victim to having stronger and more frequent desires. For those who want children to be exposed to illicit sexual material, then I would be behind bars for giving them. Are you aware of the dark path you'd be paving for the future, for their future? Anxiety, depression, early pregnancy, STDs, and even gender confusion. They're real already, but they're very difficult situations for our teens. So what's the benefit of exposing our youngest children to materials that would confuse them and promote these same difficult situations? There's not a benefit, it would be very harmful. So as a concerned citizen and grandparent, I thank the library board for protecting the innocence of children in Hamilton County by putting this policy in place. Thank you.
Can we get either the sound higher on that microphone?
Yeah, I think we can. Molly, can you turn up the volume on the panel?
And maybe we can position that a little bit better so the speakers can speak into it, because I'm having a little problem. Okay, I hear you.
Raise the volume on your mics as well, so just turn them off.
I will turn them off, yeah. Okay, and that's the one with the silver, that's the hot mic. So when you speak, try to speak into that one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Bruce Boyd. Okay.
I echo all of the previous speakers in appreciating what the library board has been doing in terms of moving inappropriate materials from the children use section into the adult sections. I applaud that. The reason I do that is my wife and I speak professionally at marriage conferences around the country, been doing it for 27 years. And we have lived and seen the impact of pornography on marriage relationships. And it is incredibly devastating. I myself was introduced to porn at 10 years old. And I saw how that shaped my thinking. And I can just share with you that porn does not set a great example for a marriage relationship. And I'm just concerned that we would even consider introducing pornography to children that would shape their minds like mine was, and heading into a marriage relationship, because I think Pope John Paul was one who said, as it goes with the family, so it goes with the nation. And if we denigrate family, and if we allow our kids to be polluted by these things that are definitely detrimental, then it is going to have a significant impact on our culture. In fact, I want to quote J.D. Unwin, who was a British anthropologist who did a fascinating study back in 1934 called Sex and Culture. And in that study, he studied every civilization in recorded history, studying specifically their sexual ethics and the impact on the culture. He concluded this: no civilized society can maintain its productive status and social order once it accepts the extension of sexual opportunity beyond the bounds of marriage for a period of no more than 3 generations. He said there's not one example in all human history where this social fact was not observed. In every such instance, those societies all suffered their demise. I want to thank you for your efforts to protect our kids and keep our nation from repeating history. Thank you.
Julie.
Hello, I too want to thank you all for moving books that are inappropriate for young children out of the children's section. And as a new grandparent, I have a responsibility to protect my grandchildren's minds and their innocence. And like a lot of parents here, I've been shocked by the things that I've heard that have been in the children's section. Not in my wildest dreams could I imagine that a book like Let's Talk About It, encouraging 14-year-olds to look at porn, reach out to porn stars for sexual advice, and then to downplay the guilt that the kids are feeling. Encouraging young adults to reach out to a porn star is not only bad advice, it's dangerous. Let me read you just a short excerpt from this book. It says, a great place to research fantasies and kinks safely is on the internet. There are tons of people and communities out there who share your interests and have all kinds of advice. Safe on the internet to talk to people. Do you know where most sex traffickers and predators hang out? In these kind of communities where you're sharing your fantasies. Exposing our children to this abuse, it's abuse and it's potentially life-threatening. Did you know that porn stars' lifespan is typically 37 years? And while my heart goes out to them, they're not a role model or people that we should get advice for about sex. And so many of them themselves are usually victims being exploited by traffickers. And their premature deaths are tragic from drugs, suicide, murder, disease. And do we really want 14-year-olds following in their footsteps? I hope that your answers are no, and I'm glad, I really appreciate what you all have done to get those books out of the children's section because the impact can be devastating to our children. So thank you for what you're doing.
Okay, next is Lisa Cardona.
Hi, is it this one? Okay. Unlike the others previously, I am not in favor of this policy. I consider it a great waste of our taxpayer dollars. It is a parent's decision what their child is going to be reading. In fact, right here on the application for a library card, immediately above the signature line, it says, if signing for a minor child, I agree to be responsible for monitoring and approving my child's use of library materials, and I assume all liability for items checked out by my minor child. You are behaving as a super parent. And that's unacceptable. It's up to the parent to decide what is appropriate, and it's up to the parent to monitor what is appropriate. Taking that out of the parent's hands and having materials unavailable that perhaps the parent finds helpful for their child is not right. Thank you.
Okay, hello. Okay. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Hi, board, thank you for hearing us tonight. My name is Rebecca Rudolph, and I'm here to speak against the collection development policy. I want to share with you my background before I get into my opposition, though. I am also a veteran. I was in the Navy myself. I served for 4 years as an aviation electronics technician. I got out as a third-class petty officer, and now in my civilian days, I own my own publishing company as well as am a published author myself. So you could say protecting the Constitution and protecting books are both passions of mine. I'm speaking your board member. I would appreciate it. You heard what I was saying. Thank you. I'm not here to convince you that this policy is ridiculous, that moving books to the adult section will only further funnel the very children who are attempting to protect some more mature content. I am a publisher, I am in the industry, and I'm telling you this will happen. Okay. There is some very explicit content in a lot of books that you are putting YA books next to. I just want you guys to be aware of that as a publisher. I'm not here to convince you that majority of the public does have an issue with this policy. Sorry, my voice is shaking, but I'm still going to be speaking. I'm here to send a message that we are here and we are watching. One day you will stop seeing the fruits of your labor and fruits of your efforts here, and you will get bored and you will move on because you have nothing more to gain. But we have everything to lose. The only obscenity in these walls is attempting to take away access to information, take away safe spaces in books, characters and stories that our teens resonate with, that I resonated with. I'm not here to convince you that censoring books and limiting access to them is the first step to fascism. I hope we've all read a history book, we know these facts. If you haven't, I'm sure you could wander these shelves while we still have full access to them and research it for yourselves. I'm here to tell you we won't stand by while it happens. I will stand here and protect our libraries just as I do all things the Constitution protects. And I think some people in this room need a reminder that they should probably be there. Thank you.
It is a reminder to not address people on the board or the legal team or the staff. Okay, next up is next. Yes.
Pay attention. Yes.
Hello. As a teenager someone today went to saying how empty it was. It is important that there are books that expose us to different topics that might be difficult or might be hard to understand in a safe space, in a safe way. That was the kingdom, but because of the fact that books have been moved, as some previous speakers have said, we're removing safe space on when to learn about these topics. I don't personally want to walk into the adult zone for a book that is intended for teenagers, but that is what this policy is ending up. What happened due to this policy? And you're removing a safe space.
Pay attention.
Look at the child. Your current system is
I am taking notes on every one of you who speak. So I am paying attention.
Please let me. Your current system will require teenagers looking for any of the topics in your bookstore to go to the adult section, which increases their likelihood to be exposed to these topics you don't want them exposed to. We're restricting our access to information in a safe way, as I've said before, I'm aware. which is not what libraries were ever created to do. They were created to provide information for people to learn and think about what they read. But this policy is encouraging the exact opposite. Thank you.
I'm going to remind the audience to remain silent when there is a speaker at the podium so we can hear them. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Elisa Roberts. Really? Okay. Melissa Cockrum. Oh. Okay. Adam Crouch.
Twenty 23. As you said, the flag behind you guys. We're talking about moving and censoring books. My grandfather fought in Normandy and drove a tank and took shrapnel in his leg and died because of that wound later on. Fighting Nazi Germany, who killed millions, including pastors, African Americans, gays, men, women, and children. And we're here today doing this again. Our librarians deserve more money, more instruction, more guidance, more support, more understanding. I don't know how to do it. I want to use the rest of my time for a moment of silence in response to Moms for Liberty, who I think a few of you guys have already left, so it must not be that important to be here, who quoted Adolf Hitler yesterday in their newsletter, stating that he who controls the youth controls the world.
Disgusting.
Moment of silence to think about what that means today.
Okay, are you through with your?
No, I'm not. Is my time up?
I can't see the clock.
Well, it's not.
I can't either. You tell me when my time.
You have 12 seconds.
I'm speaking, you guys are interrupting, so if I take that time back, please don't address me like you're asking me not to address you.
Can you please go ahead with your comment and then take your seat?
A moment of
I'm
silence.
gonna need an extra 30 minutes because I keep thinking about
Okay,
30
can you
seconds.
please take your seat? Please take your seat, sir.
I asked for 30 more seconds because I was interrupted rudely by the board. You're gonna escort me out as I'm asking for a moment of silence for Holocaust.
We did have a moment of silence.
No, we did not.
Appreciate
You
it.
interrupted.
Okay, Officer Cunningham, can you please escort this gentleman out? We're going to continue with public comment as long as we can do it in a fashion that is respectful to everyone. We'll go ahead and call Holly Beaver.
I'm Holly Beaver, and I've lived in Noblesville for over 45 years. And I want to thank you for serving on the board. However, that being said, I wish you would do a better job of representing the citizens of Hamilton County. We want you to represent us, not a small group that has extreme views. And that being said, I think we do come to this topic of censorship from different angles: a parent, caregiver, grandparent, the teen, an interested resident. or political appointee. But for me, I'm a retired librarian and educator, so I have a different view on this, obviously. When my kids were growing up, I tried to guide them towards age-appropriate and good literature. And so in that little way, you might think that, I might say that I was a censor. For me, with my background, I think a censor is someone who tries to control or restrict what other people read or see, like they do in China or Russia. I do think that with these different viewpoints, that when you're trying to control what a certain group of our kids read, our teens, then that is censorship. And that's wrong for our community.
Allison Hanley. Next is Katie Rogers.
Everybody. I wanted to share some things that I love about the library. The staff here is second to none. They're helpful and smart and kind, no matter what gets thrown at them. Sometimes I come in and ask for a book in person instead of looking it up online like a troglodyte. They are very patient with me. I love that this library is for everyone in our beautifully pluralistic society. This space is a fine example of what we can accomplish together that could never be accomplished alone. I love that the institution is a bulwark protecting us from the predictable and intentional waves of ideology that seek homogeneity. It's not just the existence of books that matters, it's critically access to them, and that's the promise of the library. My success story is exactly what scares some people. Sadly, I was raised by religious fundamentalist Christians, and I watched that movement's intentional evolution in Christo-fascism. My recovery from this brainwashing can be owed to a combination of intellectual curiosity and access to information. Books showed me the world. They were a mirror and a door, and they exposed everyone around me for what they were. From the pastors sleeping with my teenage classmates to the people lying to me about history, I knew because I read books that weren't on my parents' shelves, and I love the library for that. I grew up in a religious and political environment that said it was only okay to ask questions if they lead to pre-approved answers. The anecdote to this are the ideas and experiences of other people, and that's why books predictably come under attack by anti-intellectual movements when they rise. It's darkly funny that the real threat to these ideas aren't books that are frank about sex or emotion. They're Hume and Spinoza, Baldwin and Chomsky. The real threat to the worst among us isn't LGBTQ characters, and it's not understanding what you see when you look between your legs. It's history. Books, like music, like cinema, like other art forms, and like people, can be uncomfortable. They can be gross, they can be distasteful, scandalous, and bankrupt, and sometimes that's the point. Books expose life to the light of scrutiny.
Thank you. Rogers.
My name is Mary Rogers. I'm 15 years old, and many of the terrible things I've heard of are things I found everywhere but books. From sexual comments in the hallways of my high school to a constant looming sense of fear that hovers over those same hallways. A fear not from a book containing violence, but from the knowledge someone could break in with a gun and intend to murder us all. The books removed from the teen section pale in comparison to real life. Now, with so many books removed, I have to venture into the adult section for representations of the real world that aren't watered down or ignoring my reality. I'm old enough to know what I want to read. I'm old enough to know gay people exist and how a baby is made and that people can die. And if you don't want your little kids reading those books, then parent them. If they pick out a book you can give them little to read, encourage them to choose a different one. As a parent, that is part of your job. Even if it is somehow better to remove those books from the kids section, it doesn't justify removing books from the teen section. I'm not 5, and I am offended that you seem to think I'm so immature I still need to be protected from my own life. I don't. I need to cope with that life, and that's what the books are for. Please make the distinction between 5-year-olds and 15-year-olds and return the teen books to their rightful places in the teen zone. Thank you.
I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name. Malkin.
Hi, my name is Adeniki McKinday, and thank you so much for the opportunity to come and speak today. I am in favor of removing inappropriate books that have sexual content. Child sex trafficking is a $32 billion, up to some estimates of $150 billion a year business. The U.S. is the #1 consumer of child sex. Why am I sharing this statistic at this particular event? Because according to a veteran Homeland Security child crimes investigator, we're making pedophiles' jobs that much easier than ever before by exposing our children to inappropriate books filled with sexual content. According to this investigator, pedophiles have a doctrine called the Pedophile Network Doctrine. And as a part of their tenets of faith, their scripture, what they follow, the number 4 reason is provide excess sexual content to children in order to sexualize them, making them that much more viable for pedophiles to then convert. There's a whole world of people out here looking to strip children of their innocence. Let's not join them, whether they're 5 or whether they're 15. Parents, you are the safeguard. Do not be punked. Do not lay down your God-given rights. You are in charge of your children. They are not our children. They are not the government's children. They are your children. Those who choose to do it another way can stand before God and give the reasons for that. But as for us and our children, we will protect them. Do your job.
On Juneteenth, I went to the Children's Museum of Indianapolis and I sat in the recreation of the classroom of Ruby Bridges. I took time to really listen and to contemplate her story. The 6-year-old girl who carried a red plaid lunchbox past an angry protesters just to go to 1st grade. Only one teacher, Mrs. Henry, would actually teach her. No other students would be in the classroom with her. Ruby didn't know this when she started school, but she quickly learned that all the protests was because the color of her skin, something she could not change. This little girl in pigtails who wanted an education, but more than anything, just wanted to play on the playground with the other kids. But Ruby was sectioned off and put in her own area. She was in school, but at the same time, away from the rest of the school. And I thought about this as I read on social media that some groups were rallying to speak up tonight to protect the innocence of children from books. But are we protecting the children, or are we using their existence for our own political agenda? Maybe if we took a moment to think about when we all went back to school, remembering that first day of school, the nervousness, the excitement, the loud moments, the quiet moments, what was it that you looked forward to? What was it that you heard so much about? It was recess. We all wanted recess. We wanted to play outside with the other kids. Protecting the innocent of children means letting them play. It means letting them fall down and get back up. It means how to deal with name calling on the bus. It means reading books that are different, that are written from different ideas and deciding whether or not they agree or disagree with them. Ruby Bridges' story was so long ago, it seems like, in another America, Black and white America, but we're still separating our kids into sections: able, disabled, straight, gay, Christian, other, us, them. Ruby Bridges is the same age as my mom. She is still alive. They both turned 69 years old this year. They both have seen hatred and divide to last lifetimes. Think about the role you have on this board. Is it your intention, with your place in history, as a person who divided a library for political gain, or are you a person who turned this division around and united a library for the sake of being a good person.
Hi, my name is Lori Hand. I am a 25-year resident of Noblesville, and 32 years I've been an editor in book publishing. I have spent many years shelving books as a library employee, not here, but in Evansville and Zionsville. A previous commenter, who I don't think is here tonight, has asked more than once, who decides who the intended audience of a book is? Contrary to his assumption, the author alone does not determine the intended reading level of a book. In fact, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of professionals, educators, and parents who conceive, refine, edit, level, and create a book. Children's book divisions are entirely separate from adult divisions. They shape the books in terms of tone, word count, page count, illustration style, reading level, vocabulary, ratio of text illustrations, trim size, and even the material the cover is made of. Publishers acquire and create books based on what the market demands. They don't create books to try and further an agenda. That wouldn't make any financial sense. So not all readers are ready for all topics, and parents have a right and responsibility to guide their child's reading, but they do not have the right to tread on the rights of others. I'd also like to say that the previous collection development policy worked. It's the one that rooted out "Let's Talk About It," which I agree should not have been in the children's section. It's a misconception that people seem to forget that the previous policy worked. Publishers and intellectual freedom organizations have begun to initiate lawsuits against libraries for enacting censorship policies. This library is being put at risk. One other thing, I'm getting opposed to the block license cameras, because what they do is they store our data. So here I am, a law-abiding citizen. My movements are being tracked, being spied on, and then it goes to a national database. So unless you can flush that data for the people who have not committed any crimes, I feel like these cameras are an intrusion on our rights.
Yeah, Logan. Oh.
Hi, good evening. Contrary to what you said earlier, I do think that the development policy election policy is supported by the majority of the community. Louder does not mean majority. What it means is, just more people are showing up in different areas. But what I do appreciate the time and effort that's being put into this. I don't see it as something simple, but it is something that it really does need to be addressed. I know you're not banning, or you're not censoring. It's very easy. I have a library card. Anybody can go anywhere. I don't really think Edra would allow any type of censorship in this library. So I appreciate that. I was curious if you were going to have a list of books that are getting moved, just because I've seen on social media, oh, the Harry Potter movie books are being moved, or the Avengers, and I do not believe that's accurate. So I just thought maybe we could eliminate some fake news on that one. Also, I've heard we don't have to check it out if you don't want it, and that's true. I completely agree with that statement. However, as a parent, when I had little ones, I didn't worry that they were going to stumble across things that were inappropriate. Now I'm a grandmother. I am worried about that, and I have seen things that, the one book, I forget the name, but it had 2 adults, 1 nudity, and a child in a shower. I don't want my 5 and 3-year-old granddaughters seeing that. I don't even think that's appropriate at that age, or and that isn't what's in the children's section. Also, there's a difference between what we're exposing children to and comparing that to some type of food. I appreciate that you understand that this is a lot more serious than what has been really, I feel like, almost made fun of, and I don't really appreciate that. I agree that, we do things like we put safety caps on prescription drugs, we protect our children. And I think that this is another level of protection for children. I have read the statistics. I know history. It all says what these other folks have said, and I support what you're doing. Thank you.
Vivian Holt.
Neil White guy. I identified Sydney Bolton. I'd like to speak my name's on the list. My daughter. She had to leave tonight because she has a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old. And she had to go home to get them to bed. I just want to again thank the board. I grew up here in Noblesville. My dad was a policeman in Noblesville for 15 years. We had to move from out of the county into Noblesville when he became a policeman. Because at the time, the city of Noblesville required that you live in the city limits to be a Noblesville policeman. So we moved off of Clare, where we had 7 generations out there. And, but that gave me the opportunity to attend the Voice Club quite frequently and the library where the city hall is right now. And that's where I probably learned to read. That's where Dr. Seuss's books were my favorite books. Every time I wandered into that library, I found an adventure and I found something that was pretty cool that I could read. But never once did I worry about the common sense of coming off something that was going to make me look into or think of or something that was not appropriate for me at the time, the innocence. Right now, my daughter, Sydney, signed up her 2.5-year-old for the state approved 5 books to be read to a 2.5-year-old. She cannot use the 5th book because it's got my 2 dads in that. And again, I was raised to be loving of everyone, accepting of everyone. But I'm just concerned that we've got books that are kind to trying to make normalization of things. They're just not good for 2.5-year-olds, and they should be thinking about butterflies, Dr. Seuss, and just the innocent things of life. And having those discussions with them at when the appropriate age is correct. Thank you for
Shannon Alexander.
You can lift it up.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Shannon Alexander, Fisher's resident, and here to speak about the age appropriate clause in our collection development policy. Every book is not for every reader, but there is a book for everyone. Thankfully, public libraries do not shelf pornography. Should a parent or guardian believe a book is inappropriate for their child, that adult is responsible for limiting their own child's access. In the past, when a library patron believed a book was inappropriate and should be removed from its intended collection, restricted, or removed entirely from the library, that patron would submit a request for reconsideration. The bar to ban and censor books is historically set pretty high in America. During reconsideration, materials are reviewed in their entirety, and judgment is passed not on small parts, but on the whole. This board's new age-appropriate guidelines circumvent this process entirely by removing books from their intended collection locations before anyone can even object to them. These guidelines don't consider materials as a whole, but look for words, phrases, and ideas that some members of the board have deemed inappropriate for all teenagers. It's true, this board has not banned any books yet. Instead, you've codified censorship of young adult literature into our CDP, removing teen books from their intended locations in the teen zone based on requirements for age appropriateness unaligned with professionals, and which appear instead to be in lockstep with political groups currently working across our country to infringe upon Americans' freedom to read. You are not securing parents' rights, but have created a nanny state in our beloved library. I urge you all to reconsider the age-appropriate guidelines in your CDP and put our teen books back in the teen zone. Thank you.
As someone who was raised in the library, going multiple times a week as a child, someone who worked in libraries in high school and college, and now a mom who's been connected to the HEPL library system for 14+ years, I'm saddened to watch the polarization of this board and obviously our community. It's really sad to me. Like, I've had to fight back tears a few times tonight. The public library is for the public at large, for all users, period. I understand the concern for porn. I totally do. However, I don't believe human development books can or should fall under the category of porn. The following is a true story from the author of It's Perfectly Normal, which I use pieces of with my own children. Pieces of, I didn't read it to them because it wouldn't have been age appropriate, but I used pieces of it when teaching them about their bodies. A 10-year-old girl in Delaware picked up this book at the library with her mother. Her mother let her check the book out, and when they came home, she showed her mom the chapter on sexual abuse and said, "This is me." She was being abused by her father, and it was the first time she'd spoken about it. The father was convicted, and the judge said there were heroes in this case. One was the child, and the other was the book. The author went on to say that the mother was also a hero in the story for listening to her daughter, and that the librarian who ordered the book and kept it on open shelves in the children's area also made this possible. She further says, "I've been called a pornographer, a child abuser, every name in the book, as the saying goes. But whenever I'm called one of those names, I think of that 10-year-old girl. I wish we never had to talk about any of these abhorrent behaviors with our kids, but we have to do so because they already know about them, like that 15-year-old girl said, to some extent, and they have a right to have the accurate information that can keep them healthy and safe. They need to know how to get help to make any abusive behavior stop."
Is Kathy Sutton here? Okay. That's concluding our comments section. Okay. So we're ready.
Up to speak?
Oh.
Am I allowed to speak? My name is John Glass.
Oh,
I signed the form on the table.
sure. Yeah, I don't see it here. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is John, and I am a tax-paying library card holding resident here in Hamilton County. I am here to speak in support of those with the collection policy and their desire to remove sexually inappropriate material from the kids and teen section here. This library takes in thousands of new books from publishers, and in the past, they've gone right from the box to the shelf without library employees auditing the book for sexually inappropriate material for minors. In recent years, the newer books are much more sexually graphic, targeting even younger people, suggesting a Marxist communist approach to removing traditional moral values and parental authority from society. This ideology does not properly represent the conservative majority in Hamilton County or this current library board of trustees. Regarding our First Amendment right to free speech is ratified in the Constitution in 1791 for all those who want to talk about free speech. George Mason, father of the Bill of Rights, said, quote, "No free government nor blessings of liberty can be preserved to any people but by a frequent recurrence to fundamental principles." For example, a car today can travel over 100 miles per hour, but we have laws prohibiting that because traveling at such speeds through city streets is harmful to the public. While I am able to drive 100 miles an hour, it is not principled for me to do so. So too is providing access to explicit sexual content, either in writing or through pictures, to our minor children. They have not matured physically, mentally, or emotionally yet as adults to process the sexualized society that the big book publishers are trying to cram down their throats at such an early age. Hamilton County must lead in returning our libraries to a principled republic such as our founding fathers intended. I 100% agree with using my tax dollars to audit what goes into the children's section of my county's libraries. Take kids under 18 into a strip club and you go to jail.
Okay, that concludes our comments. All right, we're ready for adjournment. So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.